Novel Empire. Immortal God of Battle. Chapter 461 Innocent Eyes. Everyone, don't worry. Xiang Nan tried his best to sound amiable. He smiled and said, the war of 120,000 years ago has already turned into dust with the wheel of history. Although the humans and the demons are not shaking hands, they are at least coexisting peacefully. The two of them do not invade each other. I don't have any hostility towards you. I just want to get some water. The sturdy man looked at the dream butterfly on Xiang Nan's back and felt a bit more convinced. He thought to himself, if this person was really a scout sent by humanity, why would he bring a half-dead woman without any martial arts realm with him? The muscular man thought for a moment and gritted his teeth. All right. Follow us, but leave immediately after you get the water. Definitely. Xiang Nan heaved a sigh of relief and followed everyone into the underground palace. Xiang Nan and the other two followed the serpent demon and walked in the underground palace. The more they walked, the more desolate they felt in their hearts. Many of the snake race were old and dying. In this entire underground palace, the elderly snake race actually accounted for a full 70 to 80% of them. The desert serpent race, which had intimidated the world for a generation, had actually fallen to this state. It was inevitable that it would make one's heart ache. The injured snake race man introduced. Firstly, it was because the martial practitioners who had intruded into the demon sea had continuously slaughtered the desert snake race. The young snake race members who were responsible for protecting their homes were constantly decreasing in this cruel environment. Secondly, it was because there was no spiritual energy in this place that could allow the newly born serpent race to cultivate. Therefore, their cultivation realms were generally not high, and the martial arts talent flowing in their blood was constantly decreasing as the sun and moon changed. Throughout the entire snake race, if there was a snake race male who could cultivate to the heaven origin realm, it would be a rare existence. What does it mean to be at a low realm? It means less life expectancy. The earliest desert snake race, once born, would be a terrifying heavenly Yuan realm. But now, it was no longer the same as before. At this moment, large swathes of the snake race walked out from the buildings on both sides of the road. When the old snake race saw Xiang Nan, their eyes revealed deep fear. The trauma that humans had brought to them was something that could not be healed by time. The younger serpents all stared at Xiang Nan and Huang Jingjing with curious eyes. The injured snake race man brought Xiang Nan and the other two into a dilapidated building and apologetically said, "This is my home. I've wronged you all. Wait a moment, both of you. The water is as precious as ours. I'll fetch some water for you." After saying that, the man turned around and left. Xiang Nan sat there and looked at the room curiously. He discovered that the room was in a sorry state, and there were a few large holes on the roof. At the entrance, a human-looking little girl from the snake race was secretly lying on the doorframe, revealing half of her head. She peeked at Xiang Nan and Dream Butterfly with fear and curiosity. Come in." Xiang Nan smiled at the little girl. The little girl was so frightened that she immediately ran away, but after a while, she quietly returned to the door and peeked inside. "Come in. There's delicious food here." Xiang Nan smiled warmly and waved his hand. The little girl sucked her finger and trembled. "Do you have any sugar? I heard from Grandpa. Grandpa's grandpa told him that long ago, we could eat something very sweet." "Sweet, what exactly is it like?" Xiang Nan and Dream Butterfly exchanged a glance. There was also a rare tenderness in Dream Butterfly's eyes. Normally, this tenderness only belonged to Xiang Nan. Come, elder sister has it. Come and try it. Dream Butterfly took out a few exquisite pastries from her storage ring. Instantly, a sweet smell filled the entire room. When the little girl smelled this smell, she immediately widened her eyes and drooled. Usually, the word hua hua was just an exaggerated adjective, but Xiang Nan finally saw today that someone's saliva could fall down like this. The little girl was tempted by the sweet taste and rushed in. She grabbed a pastry and stuffed it into her mouth. When she took her first bite, the little girl was stunned. She shouted for pastries and whined, "5 nests are so delicious." Meng Dai intimately rubbed the little girl's hair and smiled, "Then what do you usually eat?" The little girl stuffed her mouth with pastries and took out a large mud biscuit with her other hand. The mud biscuit was the size of a bowl, round and stuffed with 2 scorpion legs. "You guys eat sand and dirt." Xiang Nan was shocked. The snake race ate meat. The little girl said that mud biscuits were delicious, because it was hard to find soil here, and meat mud biscuits could only be eaten for children's birthdays. Xiang Nan felt his nose sour and forced a smile. "Come, I have a lot of meat here. Let's take it out and share it with everyone." Meng Dai also laughed. The two of them pulled the little girl into the street and took out a large amount of cooked meat from the storage ring. Meng Dai was a girl, and there were many desserts in the storage ring. This time, it immediately attracted the attention of many snake races. Those snake races didn't dare to approach, but they rushed forward when they saw that the children were surrounded by them for a while and there was no danger. Not far away, on the roof of the building, the young and strong men of the snake race all laughed from the bottom of their hearts when they saw this scene. "Friend, thank you for your generosity. We know that fire burn hell can hardly find any food." The muscular man who suspected Xiang Nan walked over and thanked him sincerely. "Nothing. It's just a little food. It's not worth mentioning." Xiang Nan replied with a smile. At this time, Meng Dai whispered in Xiang Nan's ear, "Good brother, do you want to meet the famous desert queen?" Xiang Nan hurriedly lowered his voice and said, "Don't talk nonsense so as to avoid misunderstanding." However, the snake race's hearing was very strong. The muscular man had already heard it and sighed, "You two are both good people. It's not impossible for you to see our queen. It's just..." "Just what?" Meng Dai hurriedly asked. The man said, "It's just that it's very dangerous. Our queen has been imprisoned in a building for 120,000 years and has not been able to walk out. We are not willing to abandon her old man, so we are not willing to leave the Devil's Sea. Seeing that our desert snake race is about to be extinct, it's not impossible for you to meet the queen. At the very least, someone will have seen us with their own eyes and know that we once existed." These words made Xiang Nan feel extremely sad. The man led Xiang Nan and the other two deeper down the main road. When they reached the end, there was a path that tilted downwards. After passing through the passageway, the three of them entered a deeper underground palace. However, as soon as they entered the underground palace, Xiang Nan's heart trembled. He felt an incomparably familiar yet unfamiliar power. "That's the palace where our queen is imprisoned. You'd better not approach within 100 meters. Otherwise, it will be very dangerous." The muscular man raised his finger. 1,000 meters ahead, there was a gorgeous and unsightly palace. In the air above the palace, there was a blood-red ball of lightning. The ball of lightning continuously emitted blood-red lightning, enveloping the entire palace. Divine lightning. Xiang Nan's pupils constricted and he cried out involuntarily. Chapter 462 Breaking Through the Thunder Palace. Oh! Friend, you should be from one of the top human sects, right? Otherwise, how could you have such knowledge? The sturdy demon male asked curiously. There were actually quite a few people in this world who knew about divine lightning, but they were basically from large sects or aristocratic families with deep roots. Ordinary people definitely did not know about it. Xiang Nan was already shocked by the red divine lightning, so much so that he did not hear the man's words. Instead, he walked towards the palace step by step. Hey, friends are not allowed. Seeing Xiang Nan's strange expression, the man thought that Xiang Nan had lost control and rushed up to stop him. He hurriedly said, "You must not enter within 100 meters, otherwise you will have a life-threatening situation." Only then did Xiang Nan wake up from his dream. He looked at the red divine lightning and asked in surprise, could it be the 5th-ranked divine lightning? Shattering the red lightning? Xiang Nan's heart skipped a beat. If the red lightning was really destroyed, then it would be doomed. With his current strength, he simply did not have the ability to touch the top 10 divine lightning bolts. If he touched them, he would disappear into thin air. Let me get closer. Don't worry, I know. Xiang Nan pushed the man's arm away and continued to approach the palace. Only when he was 150 meters away from the palace did Xiang Nan stop and look up at the red divine lightning. At this moment, he heaved a sigh of relief and said, fortunately, it's not. This is the 22nd ranked red devil blood thunder. The red demon blood lightning and the shattering red lightning were both red. If it was the first time they saw each other, it would be easy to confuse the two sides. However, the power of the two types of divine lightning was different. Xiang Nan's own white flame blazing lightning was ranked 17th, while the red devil blood lightning was only 22nd, 5 places lower than the blazing lightning. However, after knowing the origin of this divine thunder lightning source, Xiang Nan felt a little disappointed. The 9 transformations of thunder could only absorb 9 divine lightning bolts at most. Was he going to waste a vacancy in divine lightning bolts to absorb such a low-ranked divine lightning bolt? Xiang Nan shook his head, feeling uncertain in his heart. He only felt that absorbing the divine lightning from the 22nd place was a bit of a loss. Anyway, let's take a look first. At this moment, Meng Dai and the man also followed. This place was only 150 meters away from the main entrance of the palace, and they could clearly see what was inside. In the middle of the palace was a snow-white sculpture of a woman whose long hair was made of poisonous snakes. Is the prototype of this sculpture the famous Desert Queen? Meng Dai asked curiously. If she really is, then she is too good-looking. I have never seen such a beautiful woman before. Xiang Nan nodded silently. Indeed, the Desert Queen had always been famous for 2 things. One was her eyes, and the other was her beauty. The sturdy serpent male said, No demonic beasts, you can live for 120,000 years. In order to survive, our queen petrified herself and resurrected herself for only 1 day in a fixed period of time every year. What? She's the queen of the desert? Xiang Nan and Dream Butterfly exchanged glances, both of them feeling incredulous. The Desert Queen had originally been able to petrify herself and use this method to extend her lifespan. The man nodded, but even if it's petrified, it can't completely lock the vitality. It's just a delay. Over the years, our queen has long since ceased to be a heavenly tribulation realm expert. Her vitality and martial arts realm are declining every day. Today, our queen is only at the heaven scryer realm. Xiang Nan sighed as well. However, the queen was indeed amazing. It was already very powerful for her to last for 120,000 years. You should be able to awaken the queen, right? Xiang Nan asked. The man looked at Xiang Nan in surprise and smiled bitterly. Friend, although I trust you now, if you want to see the queen alive, I'm afraid I can't help you. This request is a bit too much. What are you afraid of? In any case, you don't have much time left. Why don't you bring the queen back to life and cherish her last moments? Meng Dai blurted out. Dream Butterfly. Xiang Nan hurriedly pulled Dream Butterfly and apologized to the man. She is used to speaking openly. Don't take offense. I said I wanted to see the queen because I wanted to talk to her. I think I have a way to help you get rid of that divine lightning. Really? The man was overjoyed and forgot to blame Dream Butterfly for speaking too inappropriately. However, he had just lit up hope, but then he lost it. He said, "This divine lightning can't even break our queen's body. How can you do something like this?" "Nobody can destroy the divine lightning," Xiang Nan smiled. "But I mean, I can remove the divine lightning, not destroy it. If your queen maintains her peak strength, she can easily remove the divine lightning. So if I'm not mistaken, that human martial artist injured your queen back then, and even used Yuan Qi to suppress her realm, right?" "Yes, you're right." The man became excited again and said, "If you can really remove the divine lightning, I will help you awaken the queen. Alright, come and see what I can do first, and then make a judgment." Xiang Nan smiled and placed the dragon blood saber on the ground. "You two wait. I'll be right back." As he spoke, Xiang Nan strode towards the palace. Both Meng Dai and the man were very worried. They watched Xiang Nan's back farther away in horror. Meng Dai knew that Xiang Nan would not act innocently, so she was not too afraid in her heart. By the time Xiang Nan was about 100 meters away, the red demon blood lightning had already started to go berserk. It could sense other living things approaching. At this moment, Xiang Nan took a deep breath and silently circulated the 9 transformations of thunder. Then, he took a step forward and officially entered within 100 meters. The red demon blood lightning suddenly burst forth, and with a sizzling sound, thousands of lightning bolts extended out from the ball of lightning. Those lightning bolts were like spider webs, spreading densely to every corner within 100 meters. Blood-red lightning bolts connected to the ground, constantly wandering around. Almost instantly, Xiang Nan was struck by 2 streaks of blood-colored lightning. However, the moment the power of these divine lightning touched Xiang Nan, it was as if it had encountered air. Instead, it slipped out of Xiang Nan's body. Seeing this scene, the muscular serpent race man was stunned. Meng Dai was extremely happy. She clapped her hands and said, "Look, my good brother never talks big." "Yes, yes." The serpent male nodded in a daze. "This is truly inconceivable." Xiang Nan walked all the way to the entrance of the palace. He thought for a moment and even went straight in. He stopped 3 meters in front of the statue of the queen and sat down cross-legged. "Quick, wake up your queen," Meng Dai hurriedly said. The serpent man swallowed his saliva and said, "Wait, I will immediately invite the elders of the clan. Only the queen's direct bloodline can awaken her." Chapter 463 Desert Queen. Inside the palace, Xiang Nan thoughtfully raised his left hand and spread out his palm. Streaks of blood-red lightning immediately moved over. One end was connected to the true body of the red devil blood lightning, while the other was connected to Xiang Nan's palm. Xiang Nan muttered, "The power of this divine lightning itself doesn't seem to be too strong, but its attributes are quite special. When the divine lightning descended into the world, it would inevitably cause a calamity. However, it was not entirely because the power of the divine lightning was too terrifying. Some divine lightning was due to their own special attributes. For example, a certain type of divine lightning possessed a plague attribute. Once it landed, its power would not be enough to destroy everything. However, the plague it spread could leave a large area without any grass, and no living creature could survive. And this red devil blood thunder's ability was quite special. It is not to destroy the world, but to give the world too much life force. All living creatures possessed their own unique souls, so they decided on the shape and frame of their bodies. The reason why humans have hands and feet is because of their souls. The reason why trees are like this is also because of their souls. So humans don't have 8 spider legs or wings after they're born, because they don't have these things in the shape of their souls. Plague and death could deprive one of their life. If they were given more life force, they would also be deprived of their life. Xiang Nan thought for a moment and took out a grade 1 spirit herb from his storage ring. It was a small white flower. He placed the flower on the ground. After this flower was affected by the red devil blood lightning, it began to grow crazily. The pure white flower immediately expanded 7 or 8 times, and began to distort. The 6 petals turned into 15, and the pure white color turned into silver. However, the flower had already lost control. The more it grew, the more it disappeared from its original shape. In less than a minute, the flower had already turned into a small tree that was more than half a meter tall. Its powerful life force caused it to grow crazily. However, it also transcended the shape of its soul. In the end, the flower exploded with a poof and turned into juice all over the ground. Indeed, my guess is correct. Xiang Nan nodded silently. At this time, far away from the palace, the sturdy man had already gathered all the members of the entire clan. Standing at the forefront were 10 elders of the Snake clan who were so old that they were about to die of old age. When the 10 elders saw Xiang Nan sitting in the palace intact, they were extremely excited and tears streamed down their cheeks. All the members of the snake race also began to cry. We're saved. Our desert snake race is finally saved. An old, disgraceful old snake clan elder was so excited that his body began to tremble. Elders, quickly wake up our queen. Perhaps God has pity on us and has finally given us a way out. The muscular man hurriedly said. The 10 elders exchanged glances with each other. Then, all 10 of them cut their right hands and blood slowly flowed out. The bloodlines of these 10 people were the purest, and they were also the direct descendants of the Desert Queen. In the palace, the Desert Queen's statue slowly shook. Then, cracks began to appear on the surface of the statue. Following that, large pieces of stone began to fall off the statue. A beautiful and suffocating carcass appeared in front of everyone. Xiang Nan never knew that anyone could be so beautiful, as if she was synonymous with the word beautiful, as if everything beautiful in the world had been shaped from her. However, although this desert queen was beautiful, her clothes were not covering her body. Xiang Nan turned his head away from the queen's body out of respect for the big shot. Who? A soft sigh sounded from within the palace. She even has such a nice voice. Xiang Nan couldn't help but shake his mind. He felt that he was about to lose control of his desire. No man could remain unmoved in front of the Desert Queen. Even Xiang Nan was the same. The Desert Queen had a devil-like figure. She stretched out a small snow-white foot and walked down from the stone statue base. At this moment, all the members of the snake race were crawling on the ground. No one dared to look at the queen directly with their eyes, as if even looking at her was a blasphemy to beauty. At this moment, the queen slowly opened her eyes. Thus, Xiang Nan's hands and feet immediately petrified. Moreover, this petrification continued to spread to other parts of Xiang Nan's body. Xiang Nan immediately felt that he had lost the sensation of his hands and feet, then his arms and legs, and then his chest. "Stop!" Dream Butterfly was very anxious and shouted, "Hurry up and ask your queen to stop." Xiang Nan kindly went to save her. Why did she repay her kindness with vengeance? Stop the queen. How could the members of the snake race dare to say such a thing? They didn't even dare to look at the queen. Fortunately, when Xiang Nan was petrified and only had one head left, the desert queen closed her eyes again. "Tell me why you're here, human." The queen gently waved her hand, and a strand of dust turned into a veil, covering her soul-seizing body. "Turn around and look at me." Hearing this, Xiang Nan wriggled his neck with great difficulty. Only then did he begin to seriously examine the woman in front of him. "Aren't you afraid?" The queen closed her eyes and said, "Your body has been petrified by me. Why are you still calm?" Xiang Nan smiled and said, "I believe that the queen will not kill for no reason. I also believe that your clansman's description of your kindness is true." The queen of the desert curled her lips with interest. With just this simple action, Xiang Nan understood what it meant to be beautiful. He hurriedly circulated the 9 purities cosmos skill to stabilize his mind. He was afraid that his mind would lose control and he would do something unbearable. "I have a way to get you out." Xiang Nan swallowed his saliva and said. The queen nodded slightly, "I have already heard this. The reason I asked you was to ask why you did this." Xiang Nan raised his head and said seriously, "Then let me ask you, do you still hate me?" The queen frowned slightly. "No one can question me." "You haven't answered my question yet." Xiang Nan was not afraid in the slightest. He said neither humbly nor arrogantly, "My answer is in the middle of my question. I ask you, do you still hate me now?" The desert queen did not answer Xiang Nan's question. Instead, she asked again, "The sky is blue. Do you think the sky is beautiful? The vegetation is green, the flowers are colorful, the mountains and rivers are magnificent. Do you think these are beautiful?" Everyone could hear their conversation, but everyone felt that this question was inexplicable. They did not know why the queen suddenly asked this question. But Xiang Nan seemed to have realized something. He sighed and said, "I understand what you mean. That's why you refuse to open your eyes." The queen of the desert said, "I also want to open my eyes and see this beautiful world, but I know that once I open my eyes, those beautiful things will cease to exist. I don't even have the qualifications to appreciate my own appearance. My beauty is only born for others, not for myself." Chapter 464 Mind Sealing. The queen of the desert sighed softly, "There are so many beautiful things in the world that we should open our eyes and enjoy them. But I can't, because I know pity. The heavens gave me the most beautiful appearance in the world, but I can't appreciate myself. Beauty is a curse to me." Xiang Nan said, 120,000 years have passed. The people and things of the past have long since changed. Back then, your friends and enemies had already turned into dust in the long river of history. Her lady queen, this junior dares to advise you to put down what you should. The queen of the desert laughed, "If I refuse to let go, you won't save me, right? You're threatening me." "Do I have to threaten you? I didn't even bring a weapon." Xiang Nan asked. If Xiang Nan wanted to threaten her, then he simply didn't even come and just didn't save her. That way, he wouldn't even need to threaten her. The queen of the desert said, "You are an interesting person and the first person to dare to talk to me at such an age. You don't have to worry that I'll seek revenge on the human race after I leave. I've thought about many things over the years. Back then, I found one of the top experts in the 9 firmaments continent. I wanted to talk to them about peace. Autarch Qingfeng coveted my beauty. The condition for the peace talks was for me to submit to him and be his woman. I refused. Xiang Nan nodded. I've already heard several different versions of that story. I don't think you would lie to me. In other words, Supreme Sovereign Qingfeng was the one who threw you into the Devil's Sea because he was angry and embarrassed. The Queen of the Desert said, I have my dignity. In order to defend my dignity, I rejected him even though I knew the consequences would be unimaginable. If I kill humans after I leave, I will personally deny my previous insistence and my insistence on going to the 9 firmaments continent alone to find someone to negotiate. This is also a disgrace to my dignity. As she spoke, the Desert Queen waved her hand, and the stones on Xiang Nan's body quickly returned to flesh and blood. It doesn't matter if you can't save me in the end. The Queen of the Desert raised her head to the sky and let out a long sigh. A relieved smile appeared on her face and said, at least as a human, you dare to come in. This means that my persistence back then was correct. Xiang Nan nodded vigorously and said, I will prove to you with my actions that what you did for the humans and the demons was worth it. Not all humans are treacherous. Xiang Nan raised his head and looked at the dome. He pointed above and said, that is the red devil blood lightning. I have a way to seal it, but I lack a powerful material. Xiang Nan took out the white flame lightning talisman. The 9 transformations of Thunder book clearly recorded how to seal the divine lightning. However, the lightning talisman was a very powerful item. At present, Xiang Nan could not find a second lightning talisman, nor could he find a substitute for it. The Desert Queen stretched out her hand and touched the lightning talisman. Indeed, this kind of material is very rare. I don't have it here either, she said. Looks like you won't be able to save me this time. Please allow me to think of a way. Xiang Nan stood up and left the palace. He looked up at the door. He thought to himself, the only way right now should be to use his own body to seal the red devil blood lightning, that is, to absorb it. The power of the red devil blood lightning was much milder than the white flame lightning. Furthermore, it was 5 ranks lower than the white flame lightning. If it was absorbed directly, it might be possible to do so. However, absorbing this kind of thing could only increase one's cultivation realm. It did not seem to be of much help to one's combat strength in the future. It did not possess the destructive power of the white flame burning lightning. Right. Xiang Nan patted his forehead and said, I can seal it with my knife. Although the dragon blood saber was only a high-grade earth weapon, its core was the azure dragon's blood. Dragon blood would definitely be able to withstand the power of the divine lightning. Moreover, the red devil blood lightning could continuously release abnormal vitality that ordinary creatures could not withstand. However, the dragon blood was just a drop of blood, so they were not afraid. It was even possible that the dragon blood would be nurtured by the red devil blood lightning and slowly become stronger. That's right, just do it. Xiang Nan immediately ran back and asked for the dragon blood saber. Then, he came to the palace and told the Queen of the Desert what he thought. The Queen of the Desert said, if that is the case, it is indeed a good idea. However, the dragon blood can withstand the power of the divine lightning, but the materials of your saber itself cannot. Once the divine lightning is sealed, your saber will also be destroyed. Xiang Nan's heart trembled, and he was very reluctant to part. The Queen of the Desert asked, are you willing to destroy this saber and save me? Xiang Nan gritted his teeth and lowered his head without saying anything. Many of the snake race members were extremely anxious, but they didn't make any excessive demands. The Desert Queen stood quietly in front of Xiang Nan, neither urging nor persuading. After a long time, Xiang Nan gritted his teeth, raised his huge saber horizontally, and began to write on the saber. He communicated with the dragon blood saber and immediately let the dragon spirit reduce the strength of the saber. Then, he drew strange symbols on the saber with the finger power of IMMORTAL pointed. Iron scraps flew across the blade. At this moment, a hand suddenly grabbed Xiang Nan's wrist. The Desert Queen said, "This saber is very good. Are you really willing to destroy it and save me?" Xiang Nan had already made up his mind and said seriously, back then, the queen could make sacrifices for the humans and demons. Now, I can save you by destroying a saber. I admit it. The queen of the desert smiled and said, "You will be my eternal friend to the desert serpent race." As she spoke, the desert queen bit her index finger and dripped a drop of red blood on the dragon blood saber. The dragon blood maintains the core of the saber. My blood can help you lock the frame of the saber. Continue. Your saber will not be destroyed. Xiang Nan was overjoyed and hurriedly thanked the queen before continuing to carve on the dragon blood saber. After both sides of the dragon blood saber had been carved with strange symbols, Xiang Nan walked out of the palace with the saber in his hand. At this moment, everyone raised their hearts to their throats, looking forward to the next scene. The elders of the snake race crawled on the ground with tears streaming down their cheeks. After 120,000 years, the queen was finally able to see the light of day again. Xiang Nan took a deep breath and immediately activated the 9 transformations of thunder towards the red devil blood lightning. Come! Xiang Nan extended his index finger and pointed at the red devil blood lightning. After a single word, the red devil blood lightning actually floated down from above the palace and flew towards Xiang Nan. Countless cries of alarm rang out in the entire underground world. Xiang Nan soared into the air and slashed the dragon blood saber horizontally. There was a loud boom and the red demon blood lightning immediately smashed into the blade. Seal! Xiang Nan's palm landed on the blade, causing the blade to instantly tremble. As for the red devil blood lightning, it began to merge into the blade at a speed visible to the naked eye. At this time, the entire underground world was illuminated by red light like blood. Dense streaks of blood-colored lightning exploded everywhere. Chapter 465. A gift from the Queen. Xiang Nan's idea was very simple. Regardless of whether he wanted to absorb the red devil blood lightning or not, he had to seal it first. If he really couldn't gather all 9 divine lightning bolts in a day's time, then he would be able to absorb them. In any case, he would be able to obtain them without a single mistake. As for sealing the divine lightning, it had to be based on the 9 transformations of thunder. After the red devil blood thunder was struck into the blade, the tremor of the entire dragon blood saber became even more intense. Xiang Nan continued to circulate the thunder-shocking 9 transformations, treating the dragon blood saber as part of his body and extending the cultivation technique and incantation into the blade. The powerful and heaven-defying 9 transformations of thunder began to suppress the red devil blood lightning step by step, gradually reducing its restlessness. When the red devil blood lightning was completely sealed, it was like a lightning talisman. At this time, Xiang Nan's 9 transformations of thunder hadn't been removed. As the thunder talisman, the dragon blood saber was pulled by the 9 transformations of thunder. The power of the red devil blood thunder immediately began to spit out into Xiang Nan's body. Ah, shit! I didn't collect my merits in time. Xiang Nan's heart skipped a beat. The 9 transformations of stunning lightning hadn't been harvested on time, and the result had turned out like this. He had already begun to absorb the blood thunder. In this moment of hesitation, the power of the red devil blood thunder quickly poured into Xiang Nan's body, frantically increasing his vitality. As for the 9 transformations of thunder, they were created for the divine lightning, so that Xiang Nan would not be turned into a monster by the strange life force. However, this time, Xiang Nan felt that his cultivation base had also increased dramatically. 6th level, 7th level, 8th level, 9th level. 1st level of Heavenly Yuan. Tian Yuan 2nd layer. What's going on? Xiang Nan's expression paled in shock. He discovered that his realm had actually soared to the 2nd level of the Heavenly Yuan realm before stopping. However, he realized that Blood Thunder's true body was still inside the saber and hadn't entered his body. Ah, I understand. Xiang Nan was overjoyed. He did not take the initiative to absorb the blood lightning, so it would not enter his body. However, the 9 transformations of inner thunder allowed him to merge with the dragon blood saber. That was why the power of the blood lightning poured into his spiritual sea. Xiang Nan hurriedly cut off the 9 transformations of thunder, and the dragon blood saber suddenly stopped. His own realm fell back to the 5th level of origin return. Xiang Nan was incomparably excited. Yin and Yang were wrong. He actually discovered that the blood lightning had such a special effect. This was something that the white flame burning lightning did not possess. When the power of the white flame lightning entered Xiang Nan's body, it would only allow Xiang Nan to obtain its power. If it entered too much, it would destroy Xiang Nan's physical body. However, blood thunder wasn't like this. Rather, it would cause Xiang Nan's realm to soar because of his unusual vitality. Xiang Nan took 3 deep breaths in a row and tried to absorb the power of the blood lightning again. Sure enough, his realm had soared to the 2nd level of the Heavenly Yuan realm. This is really... Xiang Nan was so excited that he didn't know what to say. However, at this moment, a crisp cracking sound suddenly came from the dragon blood saber. Immediately after, a crack appeared, and the crack began to rapidly spread. Seeing this, Xiang Nan hurriedly stopped the thunder and returned to the 5th level of origin return. However, the cracks on the dragon blood saber could not be healed. By mobilizing the power of the divine lightning, you have broken the balance of the dragon blood saber. The queen of the desert had already walked out of the palace and said, "So, every time you absorb the power of the blood thunder, your saber will be damaged a little. If you use it too many times, your saber will really be destroyed and will never be able to be repaired again. Unless you can find a better material and recreate it before it is destroyed, you will not be able to repair its cracks." Hearing this, Xiang Nan heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. It seemed that he couldn't do this casually in the future. Only after he found the heavenly grade equipment refining materials would he be considered safe. However, when he stroked the small crack on the blade's body, he still felt uncontrollable heartache. "Queen, our queen has come out." On the other side, the thousands of desert snakes cheered happily. The desert queen grabbed Xiang Nan's right hand and said, "I haven't asked your name yet." "Haran sect, Xiang Nan." Xiang Nan said respectfully. This action of the desert queen made many members of the snake race feel terrified. The queen took the initiative to hold a human's hand. This was something they had never seen before. "Yes, Xiang Nan." The desert queen nodded and said, "The human world is too complicated. Why don't you leave the Devil's Sea with us? From now on, you are a relative of our desert snake race and our most sincere friend. I hope you can stay with us and live with us." Xiang Nan hurriedly knelt on one knee and said, "Many thanks to the Queen for her trust, but Xiang Nan has a heavy responsibility and does not dare to neglect it. Xiang Nan, stay." The muscular snake race man also smiled and extended an invitation. The man who was wounded earlier and rescued by Xiang Nan was also standing in the distance. He sincerely said, "We sincerely implore you to stay and live with us desert serpents and rise up together." Xiang Nan was in a dilemma. He definitely wouldn't go with the snake race, but he didn't know how to refuse their kind invitation to stay. In the end, it was the Desert Queen herself who said, "Forget it, everyone has their own aspirations. Since you have even greater aspirations, I won't stop you. You just need to remember that the desert snake race will always open its doors for you. We are your second home. When you get tired and don't want to wander around anymore, come back. We'll catch you at any time." Xiang Nan was touched and said, "Thank you, Queen. Is that your lover?" The Desert Queen pointed at the dream butterfly in the distance and said, "There is a strange poison in this woman's body. I wonder if you have noticed it." Xiang Nan hurriedly said, "I know, I used all my methods, but I couldn't get rid of the green fire poison in the dream butterfly's body. Yes, this kind of poison is indeed extraordinary. It's not that the poison is so strong, but because the composition of the poison is too complex." The Desert Queen waved her hand and pulled the dream butterfly to her side. Then, she pierced through Dream Butterfly's left hand with her index finger and took a strand of hair off her head. Every hair of the Desert Queen was a poisonous snake. She placed the poisonous snake on the wound on Dream Butterfly's left hand, and the poisonous snake began to suck the blood of the Dream Butterfly. Later on, the viper's body turned green, and then it started to spasm. Finally, it turned into a green-gray. Xiang Nan and Dream Butterfly exchanged glances and were overjoyed. Afterwards, she kept taking off her hair to suck the green fire poison for the Dream Butterfly. She destroyed 10 venomous snakes in a row before finally being unable to suck it. The Desert Queen said, "I have used up 100 years of my lifespan. This is the only step I can take. There is still about 1/3 of the poison left in her body. In the end, these ingredients cannot be neutralized with the power of my serpent race." Xiang Nan was shocked. 100 years of longevity? "Queen, you actually..." The Queen smiled and said, "It doesn't matter. You saved me. You are the benefactor of my desert snake race. I am willing to do this for you. Moreover, after leaving the Devil's Sea, I can continue cultivating. My lifespan can also increase as my cultivation realm rises." Chapter 466. Keep going. "Thank you, Queen." Xiang Nan hurriedly pulled Dream Butterfly and bowed to the Desert Queen. The Queen of the Desert said, "You saved our entire clan. I should have given you a gift in return, but you see where we are now. If we meet again in the future, I will repay you for saving my life today." Xiang Nan doesn't dare. Xiang Nan hurriedly said, "Right, you probably don't know. Now that 120,000 years have passed, the Devil's Sea has split into 3 new levels of spacetime. These 3 floors are like this." Xiang Nan explained the situation on the first 3 floors, letting the Desert Queen know in her heart, so as to avoid unnecessary sacrifices when they escaped from the Devil's Sea. The Desert Queen smiled and nodded. The snake race obeys orders. "Now, prepare yourselves. We will set off to return to the outside world at any time. Send 2 more people to escort Xiang Nan and Miss Meng Dai to the next level of spacetime." "Yes. Let's send Xiang Nan off." The muscular man and the previously injured man volunteered. Xiang Nan, this is the water I brought you. The injured man happily gave 10 water belts to Xiang Nan and said, "Don't worry, I can send you to the next floor. At that time, there won't be any shortage of water." "Thank you," Xiang Nan said. "We are all family in the future." These polite words are too outrageous. The man hugged Xiang Nan's shoulder happily and said, "When you go out in the future, you must find us. We will find the largest desert in the Blue Tide continent to live in. As long as you find the largest desert, you will definitely be able to find us." "All right." Xiang Nan was also very happy. He cupped his fists and said, "In the future, if you're empty, you'll definitely visit again. Let's go. I'll send you away." After bidding farewell to the queen, Xiang Nan and Meng Dai sat on the strange fish under the lead of the two men and swam towards the sand sea above. "Good brother, your saber has sealed the blood lightning. As long as you absorb the power of the blood lightning, your realm will rise." Meng Dai asked excitedly. Xiang Nan said, "Yes, it can be upgraded to Tianyuan second layer at most. However, every time I use it, it will cause my saber to break a little. Then use it as a trump card." Meng Dai smiled and said, "Any trump card has a price. Otherwise, it won't be considered a trump card. At the very least, if you encounter Dong Wushang again, there's no need to be afraid of him. He is at the 5th level of the Heavenly Yuan realm, and you are at the 2nd level of the Heavenly Yuan realm. If you really fight, who will win or lose? How can it be that simple?" Xiang Nan shook his head and smiled. "The difference between the 3rd level of the Heaven Origin realm and the 3rd level of the Return Origin realm is different. The higher the realm, the greater the gap between the first realm, and the harder it would be to cross." When Xiang Nan was at the Origin realm, he could defeat his enemies by crossing 3 realms, but it was hard to say whether he would be able to cross the 3rd level of the Heavenly Origin realm. However, no matter what, the Red Devil Blood Thunder was a new killing weapon that Xiang Nan had obtained. The Sun Sword Chi was strictly restricted by Su Kaiyu and could not be used randomly, but the Red Devil Blood Thunder had no restrictions. Then if you really absorb the Blood Lightning Essence, how much will your cultivation level increase? Meng Dai asked curiously. Xiang Nan shook his head, "I don't know. I don't know much about divine lightning. Furthermore, this blood lightning is very strange. It's better not to absorb it as much as possible. If it slowly changes my body's structure after years of exhaustion, then the gains won't be worth the losses." This was another important reason why Xiang Nan refused to absorb the blood mines. At this moment, under the leadership of the snake race, the two of them were able to walk smoothly in the sand sea. There was no need to worry about the damn temperature anymore. Very quickly, the two strange fish leapt out of the sand with a pu sound. Not far away, there was a space-time passageway. "This is it." The muscular man cupped his fists at Xiang Nan and said, "Xiang Nan, it's time for us to go. You must take care of yourself. Yes, we'll see each other every year. See you later." Xiang Nan cupped his fists and bowed. "Ah, right." The injured man hurriedly fumbled in his arms and said, "We have always lived in the fire-burning hell. Over the years, we have collected quite a few strange things. There's something here that might be useful to you humans. I'll give it to you." As he spoke, he took out a page and said, "This piece of paper is very strange. It can fly." Xiang Nan looked and laughed, "So the pages of this floor have already fallen into your hands. What a coincidence. All right, all right, all right. In that case, let's gather all 4 of them." Meng Dai clapped her hands happily. Xiang Nan thanked the two serpent race men once more before bidding farewell and entering the spacetime zone with Dream Butterfly. Do you think Xiang Nan will be safe? The injured man said reluctantly, although we have only been together for less than a day, I really can't bear to part ways. The muscular man smiled and said, Xiang Nan is too kind-hearted and incompatible with this treacherous world. His personality will definitely attract countless enemies for him. But it's also this kind of personality. It will allow him to gain friends who have truly passed his destiny. It can only be said that he has his own good fortune, right? Let's go. It's time for us to leave. Let's go to the outside world to see the real blue sky and white clouds. After saying that, the two serpents sat on strange fish and turned around to dive into the sand sea. When the two of them entered the space-time passageway, they felt a daze in front of them and arrived at the 5th floor. The two of them had just landed when they discovered that there was an abyss in front of them. They were so frightened that they hurriedly took 2 steps back and broke out in cold sweat. There was no ground on the 5th floor. In the sky, there were only a few small floating islands. Some of them could only hold 4 or 5 people, while others had a diameter of about 100 meters. These floating islands were floating in the air without relying on anything else. Moreover, they were moving at a very slow speed. Some floating islands had trees growing on them. Beside them, there was a stone stele that read, Gates of Hell. Dream Butterfly stuck her head out and looked down at the endless abyss. Then, she stuck out her tongue and said, It's bottomless. If this falls, I don't know where it will fall to. Xiang Nan grabbed a rock from the ground and threw it into the abyss. However, once the stone fell into the abyss, it was as if it had fallen into an endless universe. More than 10 minutes had passed, and no sound of the stone falling to the ground could be heard. Stop listening. Even if that stone has already landed, we won't be able to hear it. Xiang Nan's expression was grave as he said, This is still a no-fly zone. Don't slip and fall. Otherwise, there will be no end to the calamity. Hey, look, there's a tree on that floating island. There seems to be something hanging from it. Dream Butterfly pointed to a floating island in the distance and said. Xiang Nan hugged Dream Butterfly and said, Hold on, let's go take a look. The distance between the floating islands south was as close as a few hundred meters, and the distance between them was as close as 30 to 40 meters. This distance was nothing to Xiang Nan. He ran quickly with the Dream Butterfly in his arms, then jumped up and landed firmly on the first floating island. Looking around, the entire abyss was filled with floating islands. They could be connected into countless paths, and they could freely choose their path forward. Chapter 467 Attack from Afar. Xiang Nan and the Dream Butterfly jumped 7 or 8 floating islands in a row before arriving at the wooded floating island. Although this jump was relatively simple, when he thought of the endless abyss below him, Xiang Nan's heart beat non-stop. As long as he looked down, he would feel dizzy. After the two of them landed on the ground, they circled around the other side of the tree. Under this gaze, Xiang Nan's eyes immediately widened, and then anger sprayed out from his eyes. There were 3 corpses hanging from this tree. It was Mingyu Yuan, Crimson Tiger, and Black Flag martial artists. And Xiaomin. Xiang Nan gritted his teeth. This technique was obviously created by Xiaomin. He had saved Mingyu Yuan and the others with great difficulty, but he hadn't expected that they would be intercepted on the way to escape. Meng Dai's expression also turned cold as she said, They are demonstrating against us. Let's bury them in the ground first. We've finally experienced tribulations together. We can't let them hang here forever. Xiang Nan dug 3 graves on the floating island and buried the 3 corpses. This was not really a burial, but it was also the only thing Xiang Nan could do at present. Good brother, let's see if these floating islands can be destroyed just in case. Meng Dai said thoughtfully. Xiang Nan pointed at a floating island not far away and immediately shattered it. After the floating island shattered, it instantly recovered. Seeing this scene, Xiang Nan nodded and said, "Not bad." And Xiaoman and the others arrived here early. They might be ambushing us somewhere. We need to be careful. As he spoke, Xiang Nan hugged the dream butterfly and jumped back and forth between the floating islands, slowly moving forward. After the 2 of them advanced for a while, when Xiang Nan jumped onto the next floating island, the entire world suddenly flipped over. Gravity conversion. The endless abyss had become the sky, and the sky had become the abyss. The floating island also turned around, turning into a bottom-facing sky. Xiang Nan carelessly brought the dream butterfly with him and fell towards the sky. Holy shit! Xiang Nan couldn't help but curse. He hurriedly threw out a strand of yuan qi and wrapped around a floating island 10 meters away. The 2 of them were suspended under the floating island, and then looked down. The sky beneath their feet was endless. They looked up again, and above their heads was an abyss. Gravity has changed. Meng Dai's heart skipped a beat. Fortunately, you reacted quickly, otherwise we would have fallen off the cliff. What the hell is this place? Xiang Nan pulled his yuan qi and used his strength to carry the dream butterfly onto the floating island. After he stood firmly, he still felt a burst of fear. At this moment, they once again observed the world and discovered that there were endless abyss on the left, right, upper, and lower sides. The so-called abyss and the sky were the same pitch-black colors, unable to distinguish between the top and bottom. Dream Butterfly said, "I wonder if there are any rules for the gravity transformation in this world. How often does it happen? In short, we just need to be more careful. And I hope that there won't be any other situations on the road after that." Xiang Nan took a deep breath and continued to jump forward with the dream butterfly in his arms. After advancing for another half a day, the wind suddenly blew in the endless abyss. A fierce gale blew from the left, and the wind was very strong, making it difficult for people to stand. "What are you really afraid of?" Xiang Nan gritted his teeth and said, "The wind is starting to blow in this damn place. It's getting harder to adjust the angle of takeoff." He hugged the dream butterfly and jumped to the next floating island. Sure enough, due to the wind, the trajectory he jumped on was blown from a straight line into an arc. Deviated. Meng Dai screamed in fright, "We're off course." Xiang Nan hurriedly threw out a strand of yuan qi and wrapped it around the floating island 20 meters away, swinging it like a swing. After landing on the ground, cold sweat broke out on Xiang Nan's body and he said, "Damn it, I almost died from this ghost wind. If I don't let go of my yuan qi, I can only extend to 30 meters at most. This distance is too dangerous. If yuan qi was released, it could fly very far, but if yuan qi were to be grabbed in his hand like a rope, he would not be able to fly that far." From the beginning of this storm zone, the floating islands further ahead became sparse, and the distance between the floating islands was generally more than 100 meters away from each other. Xiang Nan felt a headache and said, "It's getting more and more dangerous." Just as he was speaking, from the darkness in the distance, a burst of void-piercing sound suddenly came. "Be careful." Xiang Nan threw the dream butterfly to the ground, and a yuan qi arrow flew into the distance against Xiang Nan's back with a whoosh. "Chu Yu." Xiang Nan raised his head and discovered that the distance was only pitch black, and there was no trace of anyone. Then Chu Yu must have a martial skill that enhances her eyesight. This is something a Bao martial artist must master. Meng Dai said, now we can't see her, but she can see us. Xiang Nan pressed down on the dream butterfly and wiped her eyes with both hands. A wisp of lightning flashed through her eyes. He used his lightning vision to increase his line of sight, only to discover that there was a floating island in a very distant place. There were 5 people standing on the floating island. 3 of them were Sima Nantian and Chu Yu from the Vast Mist sect, and another man. One of the other 2 was An Xiaoman, and the other was very familiar. They had never seen each other before. It's too far away. Xiang Nan said, in this kind of damned place, Chu Yu's bow and arrow have an advantage over everyone else. Let's stay away from them. Meng Dai said. Xiang Nan hugged the dream butterfly and jumped towards the opposite floating island. Evidently, Chu Yu could clearly see their actions. Chu Yu and the others were in front of Xiang Nan on the left. Xiang Nan jumped forward to the right. After seeing that, Chu Yu also chased after Xiang Nan and jumped forward to the right. She kept a distance from Xiang Nan and fired an arrow. The flying distance of the Yuan Qi arrows far exceeded the saber light and sword light hacked out by the martial artists. What was even more dangerous was that Xiang Nan had difficulty jumping between the floating islands due to the strong winds. And that Chu Yu also shot out 3 Yuan Qi arrows. When Xiang Nan jumped out and was in mid-air, the Yuan Qi arrow had already accelerated 3 times and was approaching. The arrow is coming. Be careful, cried Dream Butterfly. Xiang Nan immediately pulled out his huge saber and slashed down the 3 arrows. However, the tremendous force on the arrows also sent Xiang Nan flying to the right, far away from the jumping path. Damn it, Xiang Nan's heart sank. The distance he was sent flying had already exceeded the target of the floating island by a full 50 meters. Behind. There's an floating island behind. Hurry! Cried Dream Butterfly. Xiang Nan was flying too fast. He didn't even look at it and directly threw out a stream of Yuan Qi before turning around. When he felt his Yuan Qi grab onto the object, he was sure that he was safe. He quickly pulled his Yuan Qi and swung it backwards, landing on a small floating island. Whoosh whoosh! The 3 arrows immediately followed and exploded the floating island beneath Xiang Nan's feet. The floating island exploded, and Xiang Nan and the other 2 immediately flew into the air, falling from the fragments of the floating island. The floating island was instantly restored, and Xiang Nan released another strand of Yuan Qi to grab the floating island. Whoosh whoosh! 3 Yuan Qi arrows flew over, and 2 of them once again exploded the floating island. Xiang Nan was left empty-handed. The last arrow shot toward Xiang Nan's heart. Chapter 468 Conditions of Negotiation. Xiang Nan was in midair, and without any strength, he could not dodge the arrow. Apart from dodging, using a knife to chop down an arrow, using a Yuan Qi lattice to block the arrow, and using a hand to directly grab the arrow were all ineffective. All of them would be pushed out by the arrow's powerful inertia. Xiang Nan gritted his teeth and decisively used the avatar seal to separate an avatar from his body. As soon as the avatar appeared, it was struck in the heart by the Yuan Qi arrow, and it didn't even have time to use the Yuan Qi shield. On the other hand, Xiang Nan took the opportunity to release a strand of Yuan Qi to wrap around the floating island and swing himself and the dream butterfly up. Looking at the avatar, a strand of blood spurted out from his chest and helplessly fell into the sky. Pooh! After Xiang Nan landed on the ground, he covered his chest and immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. His heart was dyed red by the blood soaked in it. Xiang Nan would receive half of the damage from the avatar, and after that arrow hit the avatar, it would also transfer the damage to Xiang Nan. Although it wasn't enough to directly shoot Xiang Nan's true body to death, Xiang Nan was already injured. Meng Dai was so angry that she almost lost her mind. She shouted angrily, "That bitch! Don't let me catch her, otherwise I will definitely cut her into thousands of pieces." Xiang Nan, what's wrong with you?" After Meng Dai finished cursing, she suddenly discovered that Xiang Nan's clothes were dyed red on her chest, so she hurriedly removed Xiang Nan's clothes. At this glance, there was a small bloody hole in Xiang Nan's chest, and fresh blood was gurgling out of it. "It's fine, it's not fatal." Xiang Nan immediately crossed his legs and used the 9 Purities Cosmos skill to repair his wounds. At this moment, 3 more Yuan Qi arrows flew over. This time, Xiang Nan was prepared beforehand. Furthermore, he was sitting on the floating island and had a point of strength. He flicked his fingers repeatedly to pull the 3 Yuan Qi arrows away with his flower fingers. The arrow wound on his chest was slowly healing, but the current situation made Xiang Nan feel very troublesome. She doesn't shoot any more arrows. Xiang Nan adjusted her breathing and said, "Looks like she's waiting for us to jump. They're clearly not in fire-burning hell anymore. They don't need to kill us." Xiang Nan took a deep breath and felt extremely angry in his heart. They attacked him in the desert. Although it was unforgivable, it was reasonable. After all, everyone wanted water and wanted to save their lives. However, there was no need for them to bother Xiang Nan anymore. Dream Butterfly's anger dissipated. They clearly provoked us first, but in the end, we fought back, and they hated us. These shameless bastards are only allowed to kill people. Others can't even resist. Xiang Nan looked ahead and discovered that the floating island in front of him was about 120 meters away from him. The floating island in front of him on the left was 150 meters away from him, and the floating island in front of him on the right was 300 meters away from him. Regardless of which floating island he jumped on, he would receive Chu Yu's arrow attack halfway. At that time, it would definitely be difficult for him to dodge when he was in midair. Why don't we stop moving forward and waste our time with them? I don't believe that if we don't leave for the rest of our lives, they'll wait there for the rest of their lives. Meng Dai gritted her teeth and said. Xiang Nan shook his head, "They can afford to wait. We can't afford to wait. When Dong Wushang catches up, without Sima Nan Tian's help, I'm afraid we'll be in danger." "Then what should we do?" Meng Dai said anxiously. Xiang Nan frowned and said, "Don't worry, I have an idea. I'll first chop out 2 saber lights, and then we'll chase after the saber lights and jump over. Let the saber lights be our shield, and the arrows won't be able to affect us anymore." As he spoke, Xiang Nan brandished his saber and slashed out 2 rays of saber light. As the rays of saber light flew forward, he hugged the dream butterfly and was about to jump, but he immediately stopped. Because the speed at which the saber light flew was too fast. It was almost impossible for a martial artist to catch up to the speed of Yuan Qi with a leap speed. Before Xiang Nan could jump, the 2 saber lights flew nearly 100 meters away. "This way, I have a way." Xiang Nan took a deep breath and used the dragon shocking sunshine to slash out 2 saber lights. These 2 saber lights were slowed down by Xiang Nan, and then they jumped out, hiding on the right side of the saber lights. 3 arrows shot out from Chu Yu's left side. As expected, they struck the blade light, but they were unable to affect Xiang Nan. In the gale, the two of them landed on the next floating island. "That's great." Dream Butterfly was overjoyed. "This move of yours, Shocking Dragon Sunshine, is actually able to control the speed of the saber light at will." "Shoo." Xiang Nan lowered his voice and said, whispering, "This Dragon Shocking Sunshine saber light consumes much more yuan qi than ordinary saber light. But they don't know that. We just need to jump a few more times. I hope they find that there's no hope of a sneak attack and can stop." As he spoke, Xiang Nan held the Dream Butterfly in his arms and released 2 more streaks of Dragon Shocking Radiance before continuing to jump towards the next floating island. Next, he jumped over a dozen floating islands in a row. Every time he jumped, he would release the Radiant Dragon Saber Light, and every time, Chiyu would attack Xiang Nan with her yuan qi arrows. When Xiang Nan took off for the 15th time, no more yuan qi arrows flew over. Meng Dai was overjoyed and whispered in Xiang Nan's ear, "Did they give up?" "Very likely." Xiang Nan heaved a sigh of relief and said, "However, I have also used up 2/3 of my yuan qi. Furthermore, I cannot replenish my yuan qi with heavenly lightning. If I do so, they will find something fishy." Although Xiang Nan only released 2 rays of Dragon Shocking Sunshine Saber Light at a time, there were still 30 rays after 15 times. This was equivalent to Xiang Nan releasing 3 full-blown Dragon Shocking Sunshine Saber Light. This amount of essence consumption was undoubtedly astonishing. "Do you want to use Lightning Escape to directly charge 100 miles away?" Meng Dai said. "I can't. That way, I'll be confused. If we didn't land on the floating island, we would have both fallen." Xiang Nan shook his head and rejected Dream Butterfly's suggestion. "Keep dancing. I believe they won't be willing to waste their yuan qi in vain." Xiang Nan planned to fight. He didn't release the saber light this time and immediately jumped towards the next floating island with Dream Butterfly. However, this time, when the two of them were about to land on the opposite floating island, the 3 yuan qi arrows arrived late. Although they did not hit Xiang Nan and the other 2, Chuyu could still shoot the arrows when she saw Xiang Nan not releasing the saber light. If he didn't release the saber light the next time, the arrows would probably attack on time. "Ah! Look what this is." Meng Dai suddenly pointed at the ground and said. Xiang Nan turned around and saw that there was a yuan qi arrow inserted on the ground not far away. This was one of the arrows that had just been shot over. However, what was strange was that there was actually a messenger tied to this arrow. Pooh! The yuan qi arrow reached its effective time and turned into a spot of light. Xiang Nan picked up the message and said, "They want to talk to us." Chu Yu's ice-cold voice appeared inside when she activated the signaling order. "Xiang Nan, leave Dream Butterfly on the island. If you leave alone, I can spare your life." Chapter 469 The Cry of Dream Butterfly. Xiang Nan was stunned. He didn't expect them to offer such a condition. They actually wanted the Dream Butterfly. Meng Dai gritted her teeth and said ruthlessly, "Xiang Nan, you can leave by yourself. I'll stay here." "No." Xiang Nan refused. Meng Dai said, "If I don't stay, both of us will die. If I stay, at least you will be able to leave alive." "Stop, there's no discussion about this," Xiang Nan said angrily. Meng Dai's eyes were filled with tears as she said, "I won't listen to you this time. I insist on staying and letting me hug you one last time, good brother." As she spoke, Meng Dai quickly pressed her index finger against Xiang Nan's lips, making him unable to speak. She gave Xiang Nan a gentle hug, and her lips wriggled a few times in Xiang Nan's ears. Xiang Nan's eyes flashed with astonishment, and then he sighed, "All right, people don't die for themselves. It's better to die one than two. Dream Butterfly, your kindness is unforgettable. Goodbye." Xiang Nan was extremely sad. He stomped on the ground angrily, causing the rubble to fly everywhere. He shouted, "Take care of yourself." As he said that, Xiang Nan rushed out of the rubble and jumped towards the next floating island. Then, he jumped twice in a row and gradually disappeared. Dream Butterfly was gratified to see this scene, but her face was inevitably disappointed. She fell down and muttered, "He really left. Huh, the husband and wife were originally birds of the same forest. They flew separately in the face of a great calamity. What an eternal truth. However, who told you to be my beloved? I'll trade you for your own life. I admit it. Xiang Nan, I just hope you don't let me down. Don't forget me." At this point, Meng Dai covered her face and started crying. A few minutes later, a figure jumped on the floating island and landed on Dream Butterfly's floating island. "Miss Meng Dai, don't be too sad. Xiang Nan doesn't know how to cherish you, but I do." This person was Sima Nantian. He said happily, "Don't worry, I will treat you wholeheartedly in the future. No matter what danger happens, I will not abandon you like that heartless man." Meng Dai raised her tearful face and sneered, "Don't do this. I won't believe your men's nonsense anymore. You are all the same. How could that be?" Sima Nantian was extremely anxious and hurriedly went forward to support Dream Butterfly. He said, "I will use my actions to show you that I—" Before he could finish speaking, a shadow suddenly appeared on the rock wall beside the floating island. After the shadow jumped out of the surface of the floating island, it pointed at him head-on. Ah! Sima Nantian was shocked. This scene was too sudden. He didn't even have time to react. He hurriedly used his Yuan Qi to condense his shield. However, his reaction was too slow. Before the Yuan Qi shield could take shape, it was shattered by the flaming finger force. Sima Nantian said angrily, "Xiang Nan, didn't you leave?" Xiang Nan's face was cold as he charged forward and slashed down with a huge saber. Sima Nantian was frightened out of his wits and hurriedly used his right leg to block the attack. This time, his leg collided with the saber. Xiang Nan's saber strike directly turned Sima Nantian's entire body upside down. His leg was ruthlessly slashed to the ground, almost fractured. Sima Nantian let out a miserable scream under the intense pain. He quickly raised his right hand and condensed the Yuan Qi in his palm, wanting to give Xiang Nan a close-range cloud palm. Xiang Nan was even faster than him. He placed his palm against Sima Nantian's stomach and sent a way to a palm. A terrifying palm force instantly pierced through Sima Nantian, causing him to spit out blood and fall onto the floating island. Xiang Nan rushed forward with 2 steps, pulled Sima Nantian back with his flower fingers, and smashed an iron fist into Sima Nantian's face. This punch caused Sima Nantian's mouth and nose to bleed, and his head was thrown back fiercely. Xiang Nan lifted his leg and kicked Sima Nantian's left knee. He actually broke his knee on the spot, causing his entire left leg to bend backwards, producing a cracking sound of bones breaking. The giant saber slashed horizontally and was already placed on Sima Nantian's neck. Sima Nantian was about to be beaten to death. He raised his head half dead and cried out with a face full of blood, I clearly saw you run away. How could you hide on the side of the floating island?" Meng Dai laughed and clapped her hands and jumped up, "Shameless bastard. You've been tricked. The one escaping is Xiang Nan's avatar. As she said that, Meng Dai held Xiang Nan's arm and happily said, "My man is the greatest hero in the world. Even if the people of the world would abandon others, my good brother would not do such a thing. Good brother, kill him. If I don't kill him, I won't be able to resolve the hatred in my heart." Xiang Nan shook his head and said, "No, we still want to use him as a hostage now. If we kill him, it will be useless." Xiang Nan poured yuan qi into his throat and roared, "Chu Yu. Sima Nantian is in my hands. If you don't care about his life or death, just shoot." As he spoke, Xiang Nan dragged Sima Nantian with his left hand and hugged Dream Butterfly's waist with his right hand, jumping towards the next floating island. This time, Chuyu really didn't shoot any more arrows. Xiang Nan tied Sima Nantian up with a rope, making him unable to struggle free no matter what. Xiang Nan smiled and said, "Meng Dai, you still have a lot of crafty ideas. I really admire you for being able to think of such a plan as soon as you see the messenger." As he spoke, Xiang Nan used his lightning bolt eyes and looked to the left. He discovered that Chu Yu and the others were still following him from afar. If he jumped onto a floating island, they would jump along with him. However, they were afraid that Sima Nantian would be in their hands, so they didn't dare to get any closer. "I'm unwilling to accept defeat." Sima Nantian was like a dead dog, being held by Xiang Nan's collar. He angrily said, "How did your strength increase? You clearly couldn't beat me before. Why are you suddenly surpassing me now?" "Because of my saber." Xiang Nan did not conceal anything, openly explaining the reason why he had become stronger. Sima Nantian glanced at Xiang Nan's slanted saber and said, "This saber used to be a high-grade earth weapon, but its grade hasn't changed." Meng Dai mocked, "What do you know? Earlier, this saber was only of the high-grade earth soldier rank, but it didn't have the corresponding yuan qi gain effect." Hearing this, Sima Nantian's body trembled, and a look of despair flashed in his eyes. Didn't that mean that if Xiang Nan's saber could play a normal role in the first exchange, then he would lose to Xiang Nan cleanly in the first exchange? Fortunately, under this question, Sima Nantian knew the real difference between him and Xiang Nan. However, a trace of hatred flashed in Sima Nantian's eyes. "Xiang Nan, don't be happy too early. We already have new helpers. That's Shen Ming, ranked 3rd under the 9 Firmaments Continent's genius rankings. His strength is much stronger than in Xiaoman and I, and you won't be laughing for long." Chapter 470 Altar. Xiang Nan said calmly, "You really have some leisure. Even a genius needs to get a ranking. I don't care if he's the 1st or 3rd genius. If he dares to come, I'll kill him together. Blow your own trumpet." Sima Nantian laughed. However, this humiliating laugh of his was exchanged for 5 slaps from Dream Butterfly. Of course, in the end, Meng Dai's own hand was swollen. "Big brother, I feel pain, blow." Meng Dai pouted and handed her small hand to Xiang Nan with tears in her eyes. Xiang Nan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The 3 of them jumped forward and sat down to eat and drink for a while when they were thirsty and hungry. Meng Dai meant to thirst and starve Sima Nantian. However, out of respect for the word martial, Xiang Nan did not humiliate Sima Nantian excessively, nor did he give him any less food and drink. Meng Dai didn't understand and argued with Xiang Nan. Xiang Nan said, "There are good people and bad people, but since everyone is a martial artist, they are both descended from the horizon. Even if I wanted to kill him, I would still give him a decent way to die. I would let him die on the battlefield, by the edge of the saber." Meng Dai held her chin and stared straight at Xiang Nan, her eyes filled with small stars. You used such hypocritical words to capture Miss Meng Dai's heart. Sima Nantian mocked disdainfully, hypocrite. Think as much as you like. Xiang Nan packed his things and put the excess food into his storage ring. Dream Butterfly, prepare to leave. In 2 days, the three of them advanced several hundred li. This place was already deep into the 5th floor. Looking in all directions, one could not see any boundaries at all. During this time, another gravity shift occurred. Fortunately, Xiang Nan was prepared and was ready to save the day. But at noon on the 3rd day, the three of them stopped. Xiang Nan pointed to the front and said, "Dream Butterfly, look, the wind ahead is even stronger." Meng Dai put up an awning and looked into the distance. Sure enough, she saw a boundless vast expanse of whiteness gale. When the three of them got closer, their faces turned pale. Then how could it be a gale? Instead, it was a vast expanse of whiteness souls. These undead souls had also appeared from nowhere, and the sky and the earth were completely vast expanse of whiteness. Moreover, the number of these undead souls was extremely dense, and they were still flying in 2 different directions. In the abyss below, countless undead souls flew into the sky. At the same time, countless undead souls flew into the abyss below. These souls flew cross-legged, leaving a small gap between the souls. Xiang Nan tried to stretch out his arm first and grabbed it with his hand. When the white ghost pierced through his palm, he suddenly felt powerless and his heart pounded in panic. Shit! Xiang Nan gasped and retreated. These souls can't be touched. As long as they touch a little, their entire body will be weak. Then how are we going to jump over? Dream Butterfly was also scared. If the undead touched him halfway through the jump, he would lose his strength. Perhaps even more undead would pierce through his body and poison him alive before he died. Xiang Nan meditated on the spot and activated the thunder to restore his Yuan Qi to its full state. Then, he slashed out a saber light towards the distance, and discovered that the saber light could not injure the souls, but directly pierced through them. I finally know why this place is called the Gate of Hell. Xiang Nan took a deep breath and pointed at the sky, shouting, "Quench the sun." A fierce sunlight descended, and the 4-meter diameter pillar of light. The undead soul touched by the edge of the pillar of light was immediately scattered by the sunlight. The rest of the undead, on the other hand, were afraid of the sunlight and walked around. "All right," Xiang Nan said happily. Xiang Nan brought the 2 of them and jumped towards the opposite floating island. Wherever they passed, those undead souls quickly dodged. Not a single undead dared to touch the sunlight. However, after jumping for nearly 10 minutes, Xiang Nan had exhausted his vitality and could only replenish it again. After that, he continued to jump. During that time, he looked at An Xiaoman and Chu Yu with his lightning photoelectric eyes and discovered that the man named Shen Ming was holding a strange talisman high up in the air. The talisman emitted a holy light that enveloped the few of them, and it also shuttled between the souls of the dead. Moreover, their talismans did not consume Yuan Qi, and they quickly left Xiang Nan's field of vision. After advancing a few dozen miles, the situation changed again. The white undead disappeared here, and instead, it was replaced by large patches of black undead. Xiang Nan stretched out an arm while the sun was quenching. However, those black undead souls were extremely ferocious. They did not dodge the sunlight at all, but directly collided with them. Every black undead would smash into the sunlight and emit a black smoke. At the same time, Xiang Nan felt that his Yuan Qi would be rapidly consumed. "Looks like we're about to reach the end of this floor," Xiang Nan said, if we can pass through this black necromancy region, we might encounter the next spatial and temporal passageway. But it's not easy to break through. Ah, good brother, look behind you. Dream Butterfly looked around for a while before suddenly pointing at a floating island behind her right and shouting. Xiang Nan and Sima Nantian both turned around and saw that the white souls around the floating island were actually flying around the floating island. The rest of the undead flew from top to bottom, or from bottom to top. Only the undead of this floating island circled around the floating island, as if they were protecting something. There's actually such a situation. Xiang Nan wondered, previously, we only cared about traveling. We didn't pay attention to our surroundings, and we didn't know how many floating islands we missed. Let's go and see what the mysteries are. The white undead was still afraid of the sun. Xiang Nan brought the two of them and jumped towards the floating island. Because there were too many souls coiling around the floating island, it wasn't until the three of them landed that they could clearly see the true appearance of the floating island. In the center of the floating island, there was a very small altar. The altar was round and could accommodate 3 people sitting side by side. Around the altar was a circle of black candles. The flames from those candles were also black. At the center of the altar was a black wooden box. Xiang Nan pulled the box over with his flower fingers and opened it. There was a book lying inside. It says, Heavenly ENG Ghost Control Technique. After these words, there was a small line of notes, Earth Grade High Grade, Profound Tao Technique. Xiang Nan and Dream Butterfly exchanged glances, their eyes widened in shock. A high-grade Earth grade spell. This grade was too exaggerated. None of the 3 of them dared to believe that there was such a high-grade profound Tao technique hidden in such a damned place. Chapter 471 Corrupt Technique. In the real world of martial arts, there were countless cultivation techniques and martial skills, but very few of them were of high grade. This was because cultivation methods, martial skills, and weapons were completely different. As long as you can find a high-grade weapon forging ore and hand it over to a weapon forging master, you will be able to forge a weapon of the corresponding grade. Therefore, in the world of martial arts, heavenly grade weapons, even Tao grade weapons, and even profound grade weapons could be seen. However, martial skills are not like this. Your martial arts realm is completely different from whether you can create a high-grade martial skill or not. Even if you are a heavenly tribulation realm expert that dominates the world, but your martial arts wisdom is not there, then you may not even be able to create an earth-grade martial skill. Therefore, in the world of martial arts in Xiang Nan's era, it was very difficult to see even a heavenly grade martial technique. Even if there was one, it was definitely a hot item. Perhaps it would trigger a chaotic battle between sects. Xiang Nan won the championship in the 12-sect joint exam. He only received a mid-grade local grade martial skill for such a miraculous achievement, although he didn't want it. The techniques that Xiang Nan had mastered that could surpass the heavens were the 9 transformations of thunder, the sun god technique, and the 9 purities cosmos skill. However, these 3 techniques were all techniques, not martial skills. Even if the lightning dragon saber technique he had just created was able to endure to its death, it was only an earth grade middle grade saber technique. My God! Meng Dai grabbed the book and said in surprise, it's actually a high grade earth grade spell. I've really made a fortune this time. As long as I reveal this book, I'm afraid all the profound Tao experts in the world will fight crazily for it. Good brother, hurry up and cultivate. This book is incomparably mysterious. It can't be practiced by others. Only you can do it. After practicing it, we will have a way to deal with those undead souls. However, Xiang Nan was not that happy, because just the name of this technique made him feel very uncomfortable. Heavenly ENG ghost controlling technique? It was obviously a corrupt technique. Then, he opened the Heavenly ENG ghost controlling technique's incantation and saw that the more he looked at it, the more frightened his heart became. No. Absolutely not. This technique is too evil. A cold sweat appeared on Xiang Nan's forehead as he said, "To cultivate this technique, you actually need to refine your soul." The power of the Heavenly ENG ghost controlling technique was extremely terrifying. After successfully cultivating, it could control the souls and ghosts within a radius of 10 kilometers, turning them into their own weapons. Just imagine, if a martial artist who had cultivated this technique were to fight against someone on an ancient battlefield ruin, then it would be simply invincible. There were countless souls of soldiers that could be used as weapons for attack. However, in order to cultivate this technique, one had to first refine one's soul into a fierce ghost. Everyone has a soul, but what would it feel like if a person's soul turned into a ghost? After hearing Xiang Nan's explanation, Meng Dai was also dumbfounded. She said, refining her soul into a fierce ghost. Isn't she going to become a bloodthirsty mad devil? If we don't practice, then we can't practice this kind of evil technique. Hey, what's wrong with that? Sima Nantian smiled and said, a martial practitioner, who doesn't want to obtain powerful strength? It's nothing even if he pays a small price. If you guys refuse to practice, you can leave it to me. I don't care. Xiang Nan said coldly, this kind of evil technique should not be passed down. It not only destroys the souls of martial artists, but it is also extremely disrespectful to the deceased. As he spoke, Xiang Nan slapped his palm, shattering the Heavenly ENG ghost controlling technique. You! Sima Nan was so angry that he vomited blood. He angrily said, are you crazy? That's a high-grade earth-grade spell. Doing so is simply a waste of heaven and earth. Heaven's will is intolerable. Let's look for something else. Meng Dai said, perhaps there are other profound Tao techniques. Not all of them require sacrificing one's own soul. Xiang Nan had no other choice but to take a step backwards. This time, they all kept their minds on it. After retreating for more than 10 kilometers, they found another floating island that was coiled by the souls of the dead. After going up, he also found a wooden box, but there was no altar here. From the looks of it, there really doesn't seem to be any need for soul refinement. Xiang Nan took out the books from the wooden box and took a look. There were 4 words written on the outer cover of the book, Heavenly ENG Fiend Physique. This book, on the other hand, was a mid-grade spell of local quality. Look! Sima Nantian said angrily, how can a high-grade earth-grade spell be so easy to find? Xiang Nan, it's useless for you to regret breaking your intestines now. Xiang Nan coldly swept a glance at Sima Nantian, then went to look at the incantation of this spell. He also discovered that this was an escape technique. After cultivating, a person who cultivated this technique could transform their flesh and blood into the body of a dead soul within a certain period of time. Even if a living person turned into a ghost, after becoming a ghost, a martial artist's physical damage to the enemy would be reduced by half. Moreover, the ghost body had another advantage. It could roam freely between heaven and earth, even drill into the ground, and roam in the sea of flames. It was as if a fish could swim in water. However, the downside was that under the ghost body state, his own strength would also be reduced by half. This is good. Meng Dai said, after cultivating this Heavenly ENG Fiend body, we can ignore the interference of the black undead and fly directly through them. That's what I said, but... Xiang Nan frowned and said, you don't have a martial arts realm right now, so you shouldn't be able to learn it. Before he could finish speaking, dozens of undead souls suddenly appeared around the floating island. These dozens of white undead flew into the floating island and began to circle around Xiang Nan. Xiang Nan and Meng Dai were dumbfounded, not knowing what this scene represented. Layers of ripples appeared in the circles formed by the dozens of undead souls, as if they had turned into a circular door. Immediately after, 3 arrows shot out from the door. The 3 arrows were very close to Xiang Nan, and they were extremely fast. Xiang Nan didn't even have time to block it. He could only push the dream butterfly away and jump out. At the same time, along with the 3 arrows, there was also a woman. The woman took away the book in Xiang Nan's hand and turned around to catch Sima Nantian. Chu Yu. Xiang Nan's heart skipped a beat. That Chu Yu was so frightened that she hurriedly retracted her hand to grab Sima Nantian and retracted it back into the circular door. The dozens of white spirits that circled around instantly dissipated into smoke and disappeared, and they died just like that. Xiang Nan frowned. Although he was unwilling to cultivate the heavenly Yin fiend physique, he was even more unwilling to be snatched away by Chu Yu and the others. What kind of door is that? Meng Dai asked in shock. Can they actually use their souls to build a spatial passageway? We have to hurry up, we can't delay any longer. Xiang Nan said in a low voice, there are too many souls here that they can use. If they continue to cultivate the heavenly Yin fiend physique, they will appear and disappear, making it impossible for us to guard against them. Chapter 472 Timing Control. But we haven't learned the profound Tao technique. How did we get past that black necromancy region? Meng Dai said. Xiang Nan said, I have no choice but to forcefully barge in. Right, you just said that Chu Yu and the others have a talisman. Perhaps Sima Nantian also has one on him. Meng Dai said. Stop dreaming. Sima Nantian sneered, that talisman was given to him by Master Shen Ming. It can be used to ward off evil spirits. How could I have such a treasure? If you say no, then no. What if, quickly, open your storage ring. Meng Dai took Sima Nantian's storage ring off. It won't open. Sima Nantian turned around and said, you love Xiang Nan so much. I wish I could cut Xiang Nan into pieces. How could I help him? Xiang Nan frowned and said, if you don't open the storage ring, after I kill you, your storage ring will also automatically open after losing its owner. Do you dare to kill me? Sima Nantian provoked, kill me and you won't have any hostages. Xiang Nan looked up and smiled. Xiang Nan, am afraid of many things in my life, but I am not afraid of being threatened by others. With that, Xiang Nan raised his saber and without even blinking an eye, directly slashed towards Sima Nantian's neck. Then Sima Nantian was really scared this time. He saw a faint smell in Xiang Nan's eyes. I'll drive, I'll drive. Sima Nantian's pupils contracted in fright as he hurriedly shouted. Xiang Nan suddenly stopped the blade. At this moment, the blade was already a little embedded in Sima Nantian's neck, and fresh blood was surging out. Do you really want to kill me? Sima Nantian tugged at his throat and angrily said, you crazy bastard. As he spoke, his storage ring cracked and was untied in Meng Dai's hand. Dream Butterfly poured out everything in the storage ring. More than 70 to 80% of the items were forging ores from the interlocked spacetime zone. Xiang Nan picked up a few pieces of Earth-grade beginner-grade ores and poured a few hundred pieces of Earth-grade beginner-grade ores into his storage ring. Ha! Pages. Dream Butterfly took out a page from the mess and handed it to Xiang Nan. The first 4 pages were all in Xiang Nan's hands, so this was undoubtedly the flight page of the 5th floor of the Gate of Hell. I've gathered 5 of them. I really can't find a place to break through my iron shoes. Meng Dai was happy. Her grievances on this floor had eased a lot because she had obtained the pages of the book. Seeing that dream butterfly was flipping around inside again, Sima Nantian said, "There's no need to waste my energy. I came to the Devil's Sea to look for treasures. How could I bring my treasures here and let others benefit?" Sure enough, Dream Butterfly searched through the items in Sima Nan's Tian Na ring, but she didn't find any other treasures, nor did she find any talismans that emitted holy light. Meng Dai angrily poured all the food Sima Nantian had brought into her storage ring and said, "I wonder what the next few floors will look like. In short, I'm prepared. Looks like we can only barge in. Let's go." Xiang Nan sighed and brought the 2 of them to the edge of the black and white intersection. In front of him was the area where the black undead shuttled. Xiang Nan pointed at the black undead and said, "Although the number of these undead is very dense, they are not seamlessly connected." Hearing this, Sima Nantian was so scared that he scolded, "Xiang Nan, if you want to die, you can die yourself. Don't pull on me. Those black souls are flying so fast, do you still want to pass through their cracks? That's impossible. Don't speak." Meng Dai slapped Sima Nantian on the face, and then extended her right hand to Xiang Nan with tears in her eyes. "Big brother, your hand hurts, blow." Sima Nantian saw the woman he admired acting coquettishly and obediently in front of Xiang Nan, and he gnashed his teeth angrily. "Dream Butterfly. Even if you are as good to me as you are to Xiang Nan, I will be satisfied even if I die," Sima Nantian said angrily. Xiang Nan didn't bother to pay attention to the quarrel between the 2 of them. He just stood silently at the edge of the floating island and quietly watched the trajectories of the undead. 10 minutes later, Xiang Nan nodded and said, "Although the sequence of these undead souls is messy, at least their flying speed is the same. Even so, I am confident that I will be able to pass through them." "Stop bragging," Sima Nantian roared, "these souls are so dense that it's almost raining. If you want to die, you can go yourself. Don't bring me along." Xiang Nan ignored him and lowered his head. Gradually, a strong wind blew behind Xiang Nan without warning. "Roaming dragon riding waves, let's go." Xiang Nan suddenly raised his head and grabbed Dream Butterfly with his left hand and Sima Nantian with his right. He saw the right time and jumped out without hesitation. In his heart, Xiang Nan treated the flying souls as the saber light and sword light of the enemy. He calmly and decisively analyzed the flight paths of the undead and drew up a path ahead of time. With this jump, he was about to collide with a black undead. However, the black undead followed the established route and almost flew into the sky from Xiang Nan. It was just a tiny bit away from touching Xiang Nan. After missing out on this undead, the next undead flew down from above in front of Xiang Nan. Xiang Nan controlled the timing and judged the flight path of the undead to the extreme. In such a dangerous and extreme environment, he was as calm as a piece of jade without emotion. His eyes were half narrowed, and he didn't show the slightest bit of emotion. Meng Dai did not have the slightest fear on her face. She held Xiang Nan's arm and stared fixedly into Xiang Nan's eyes. She believed that this man could give her safety. Countless black souls whistled past from top to bottom, but Xiang Nan jumped 200 meters away and landed on the opposite floating island. After the 2 of them landed on the ground, Sima Nan's genius fell to his seat. His entire body was soaked in cold sweat. Just now, on the way to the jump, he was filled with incomparable fear. He felt that he was about to be hit several times, but he was so scared that he didn't even dare to breathe out a single mouthful of air. He actually jumped over. Sima Nanshan's face was filled with fear as he said, "Xiang Nan, what kind of monster are you? Such a dense group of undead, you actually managed to find a gap and jump over. You're not a human." Whoosh! Xiang Nan let out a long breath. His eyes were still firm, but cold sweat was dripping down his forehead as he said, "Let's go, next." "No." Sima Nantian cried out in shock, "A lucky time doesn't mean a lucky time. Xiang Nan, leave me here. Please, I don't want to risk my life with a lunatic like you." It was useless to say more. Xiang Nan ignored him and directly jumped towards the next floating island with him. This time, Sima Nanshan's terrified screams came from the dense shuttle of undead. Chapter 473 He that does evil shall find evil. After all, Xiang Nan was not a god, and it was impossible for him to do so. When he jumped towards the 14th floating island, he was still hit by a black undead just before he landed. At this moment, Xiang Nan and the others fell from the sky. Fortunately, they had already reached their destination and fell on the edge of the floating island. Sima Nantian was even more miserable. When he fell, half of his body was exposed outside the floating island. "Ah!" Sima Nantian grabbed his hair and screamed. His mind was on the verge of collapse. Death is not scary for martial artists. Sometimes, when both sides fight, the enemy slashes down with a single blade. Gritting your teeth, you will pass. In the worst-case scenario, your life will end in a blink of an eye. He was afraid that this kind of torture would jump over even though he knew that he would die. It was as if a prisoner was about to be beheaded. He was already prepared, gritting his teeth and waiting for the knife to end his life. He was afraid that at this moment, the executioner's situation would occur frequently, and he would halfway through the attack. When he discovered that the supervisory officer hadn't given the order, he would withdraw the saber. The second saber was about to land, but it was rusted and sharpened beside the prisoner. This kind of pain was enough to torture a death row prisoner to madness. "Xiang Nan, how are you?" Dream Butterfly hurriedly shook Xiang Nan's shoulder. At this moment, Xiang Nan's face was covered with a layer of black gas. It was left behind by the undead after passing through his body. Xiang Nan remained silent and immediately circulated the 9 purities cosmos skill cross-legged to expel the remaining hostility in his body. At this moment, dozens of black souls suddenly turned into a portal on the floating island. 4 figures jumped out of the portal. Xiang Nan grabbed the huge saber and immediately stood up. Chu Yu and Xiaomin's target was Sima Nantian. The two of them surrounded Sima Nantian from the left and right and grabbed his shoulders from the left and right. The so-called third genius of the 9 firmaments continent, Shen Ming, and the male disciples of the vast mist sect surrounded Xiang Nan. Shen Ming was also a 6th-level origin returning martial artist, but it was clear that his yuan qi fluctuations were even stronger than in Xiaomin's. Shen Ming held a blood-red sword in his hand and quickly slashed down on Xiang Nan's shoulder. The male disciple of the vast mist sect condensed a cloud hand to grab Xiang Nan's head. Xiang Nan took a horse step and straddled the giant saber across his waist. He held the back of the saber with his left hand and the hilt with his right. He shouted, "Thunder, the raptor swings its tail." "Who?" A large crescent lightning blade howled out. At the same time, a shadow of an azure dragon flung its tail appeared in the air behind Xiang Nan. The moment Shen Ming's red sword struck the lightning saber light, it was bounced away fiercely. This Shen Ming's reaction speed was astonishingly fast. He immediately changed from charging forward to jumping backwards, then stabbed the long sword directly into the ground. His hands pressed onto the hilt of the sword and shouted, not moving like a mountain. The sword immediately began to buzz and tremble, and the surging yuan qi condensed into a mountain-shaped strong light. The reaction of the male disciple of the vast mist sect was much weaker than Shen Ming's. He didn't even have the chance to struggle and was slashed by the lightning blade. After the lightning saber light struck the small mountain of yuan qi, its speed suddenly slowed down, but it was still constantly cutting into the mountain, seemingly about to cut off the entire mountain by the waist. Shen Ming's pupils constricted and he asked in shock, "What kind of blade light is this?" As he spoke, he jumped up, and the lightning blade cut off the mountain peak. With a whoosh, he flew out from beneath Shen Ming's feet. Xiang Nan's fierce dragon waved its tail. The blade light it slashed out was close to the full moon. Even Chu Yu and Sima Xiangnan, who had been rescued from behind, were within the range of the blade light's attack. Chu Yu and Xiamen hurriedly grabbed Sima Nantian, dodged the blade light with a high jump, and quickly rushed towards the portal. "Which way?" Xiang Nan shouted, "Quench the sun." A fierce sunlight descended from the sky and landed heavily on Xiang Nan. Xiang Nan raised his hand and struck Wei Tua Palm. Wei Tua Palm used the power of the sun as his yuan qi and directly hit the portal. The power of the sun, the most restrained evil spirits. Although the black undead would not dodge the power of the sun, it did not mean that they could withstand it. The dozens of black undead spirits that circled around the portal were instantly blasted into black gas by the palm of the sun's power, and the portal disappeared. Chu Yu and the others had already entered the portal with their left legs, but they had missed one leg and fell out again. "You're courting death." Shen Ming's eyes narrowed as he slashed towards Xiang Nan with his sword in hand. The sword light was the same color as the sword body, it was also blood red. On the other hand, Xiamen also slashed down with his sword. The fierce essence fire sword and Shen Ming's sword light were pushing towards Xiang Nan. Right at this moment, Chu Yu angrily screamed, "It's all your fault, bitch. If it weren't for you, how would my brother Sima have suffered so much?" As she spoke, Chu Yu actually shot an arrow towards Dream Butterfly. At this moment, Dream Butterfly was stunned. She stood where she was and did not even have time to move. Without her martial art strength, it was impossible for her to dodge Chu Yu's arrows at the speed of an ordinary person. A moment ago, Xiang Nan had just raised his saber and fought against Shen Ming and Xiamen. He had actually used one person's strength to fight against two experts. Xiang Nan took 3 steps back, while the two of them took 2 steps back at the same time. No. Almost at the same time, Xiang Nan caught a glimpse of Chu Yu's arrow just leaving the string. Xiang Nan didn't even think about it and directly collided with Chu Yu. This collision was almost at the same time as the action of blocking the 2 sword lights with the saber lattice. The giant saber was still withstanding the recoil force and often tilted backwards. In this state, it was impossible to use the giant saber to chop down the arrow. Xiang Nan knocked Chu Yu flying, and the arrow had already left the string and was flying towards Dream Butterfly. At the same time, Xiamen and Shen Ming's next sword light slashed down. At this critical moment, Xiang Nan forcefully twisted his waist and swept Sima Nantian out with a horizontal kick. This kick was caused by Xiang Nan's anger, and it almost exhausted all the yuan qi he could erupt in an instant. Sima Nantian's entire body was kicked to the point of collapsing. He caught up to the arrow at an even faster speed. Pooh! The yuan qi arrow pierced through Sima Nantian's heart without any bias. Sima Nantian's pupils contracted as he quickly spread out. His eyes were filled with ashes. He looked at Chu Yu in the distance in disbelief, but his body was pushed out of the edge of the floating island by the arrow. The dream butterfly was also knocked out of Sima Nanshan's flight path. Xiang Nan took a flash step to the edge of the floating island and pulled the dream butterfly back forcefully with his flower fingers. Looking at Sima Nantian, his face was filled with despair and disbelief as he was engulfed by countless black souls. The scene suddenly quieted down. Chu Yu's eyes were wide open, and at a visible speed, she quickly climbed onto the bloodline. Immediately after, Chu Yu went crazy and screamed, "Nantian." Chapter 474 Display one slight skill before an expert. Aya, it's broken. I've lost the alchemy prison. Meng Dai looked back with lingering fear. The alchemy prison bound Sima Nantian and fell into the abyss. No need. Xiang Nan pushed Dream Butterfly behind him. Xiang Nan. Chu Yu's long hair fluttered about like a ghost, tearing her heart and lungs apart as she said, "You and I are irreconcilable. Should I live him?" Xiang Nan said coldly, "Well done, I will go my way. You must pester us when you cross your canopy. I don't know if I dug up your ancestral grave or burned down your ancestral mansion in my last life. As for why I made you chase after me so relentlessly. Sima Nantian ended up like this because of himself. If you want to blame him, blame yourself. You can't blame anyone else." That Chu Yu was already mad with rage. How could she still listen to Xiang Nan? She pointed at Xiang Nan and shouted, "He has the formless tribulation finger art I set on him. Kill him." "Hey, there's no need for you to say anything. We'll do it ourselves." Shen Ming was the first to step out and slash down towards Xiang Nan with his sword in hand. He used a very strange martial skill. When the sword light descended, the image of a mountain actually condensed in the sky. When this sword landed, it seemed to carry endless pressure. The power of that sword was so great that even Xiang Nan felt his heart skip a beat. And Xiaoman, on the other hand, jumped out horizontally and lay flat in midair, slashing out 3 streaks of flaming sword light towards Xiang Nan. Chu Yu pulled out her longbow and shot out 3 yuan qi arrows in a row. All 3 yuan qi arrows burned brightly. Xiang Nan took a horse step and roared, "Thunder!" The raptor wagged its tail. The phantom image of the azure dragon's tail flick appeared in the sky. In the midst of the lightning, a saber light that was close to the full moon slashed out horizontally. Chu Yu's arrows and Xiaoman's sword light were instantly crushed. Because Xiaoman was too close, even the sword in his hand was shattered by Xiang Nan's saber light. Pfft! And Xiaoman spat and pulled out his iconic black saber from his storage ring. Originally, I didn't want to be ruined by his phaseless tribulation finger. Now, it seems like I can only take out my precious saber. This brat's saber light is a bit exaggerated. My earthly grade beginner stage sword is actually unable to withstand a single move of his finger power. Right at this moment, Shen Ming's sword also descended, just in time to suppress Xiang Nan's large crescent blade light. Under this pressure, Xiang Nan's lightning blade light was actually suppressed in mid-air, unable to advance any further. Seeing this scene, Xiang Nan's heart sank. He thought to himself, what a powerful force. He raised his head to look at the phantom of the green mountain above Shen Ming's head, his heart thoughtful. At this moment, Xiang Nan's saber light was still buzzing and trembling, attempting to continue spreading out. However, the saber light was so tightly suppressed by Shen Ming that it was unable to move forward at all. "Hee, do you think my sword is as heavy as a mountain?" Shen Ming smiled sinisterly and said, "Let me tell you, this sword strike of mine possesses the weight of a mountain." As he spoke, Shen Ming suddenly pressed down his sword and saw that Xiang Nan's saber light was actually broken inch by inch. People often use the power of mountains to describe a martial artist's strength, but Shen Ming's strength really attracted the weight of a mountain peak. This kind of martial skill was extremely rare. Even Xiang Nan was moved when he saw it. Again. Brat, let's see how arrogant you are this time. You won't be able to escape Brother Ming's five-finger mountain. And Xiaoman was presumptuous as he raised his black saber and slashed at Xiang Nan with it. Chu Yu bit the tip of her tongue in one bite. Relying on the strange pain coming from the tip of her tongue, she used an archery technique that she had never seen before. Lightning arrow. Pa! That Chu Yu's longbow suddenly turned into a huge arc of lightning, while her Yuan Qi arrows directly turned into 3 beams of lightning. The speed of thunder and lightning was extremely fast, especially at close range. There was no way to dodge it. Xiang Nan didn't even have time to react and 3 lightning arrows struck his chest. The bright lightning suddenly exploded on Xiang Nan's chest. That's great, I got it. And Xiaoman was overjoyed. That Chu Yu seemed to be crazy as she screamed, I'll make you crazy, I'll make you crazy. With a lightning longbow in her hand, she launched another indiscriminate bombardment at Xiang Nan, who was engulfed by the lightning. Her lightning arrows were so dense that they turned into mad shadows. In an instant, more than 100 arrows were fired at Xiang Nan. Seeing this scene, even Shen Ming couldn't help but be shocked. He said, the flash archery that Chu Yu found in fire-burning hell is truly extraordinary. This time, I'm afraid that Brat is doomed. And Xiaoman nodded and said, it's a pity that Chu Yu attacked too ruthlessly. After killing Xiang Nan, I wonder if there is a formless tribulation finger incantation in his storage ring. I heard that finger technique is heaven-defying. Chu Yu fired more than 100 lightning arrows in a row. She was panting and said, Brother Sima, I have avenged you. As soon as he finished speaking, a blade light suddenly shot out from the fierce lightning explosion circle where Xiang Nan was. Be careful. Shen Ming's reaction was swift. He sprinted forward and directly used his sword to hit the blade light. However, the saber light and lightning immediately sent Shen Ming flying. The tremendous force caused Shen Ming to spit out a mouthful of blood. The saber light was deflected by Shen Ming, and with a whoosh, it cut off Chu Yu's entire left arm. Why? Everyone cried out in disbelief, and Chu Yu covered her severed arm and screamed repeatedly. In the lightning explosion area, Xiang Nan's figure gradually became clear. His eyes narrowed slightly, and his entire body was wrapped in dense lightning. He was actually unharmed in the slightest. Isn't it too much to play with lightning in front of me? Xiang Nan clenched his right hand and the thunder and lightning around him instantly shrank into his palm, condensing into a frantically beating thunderball. It's not possible. Chu Yu screamed like a madman, even if you have a lightning attribute, it doesn't mean that you can defend against all lightning attacks. Indeed, it was like there were countless fire vein martial artists under the heavens, but wasn't fire vein martial artists afraid of any fire attacks? What if the 2 fire vein martial artists clashed? However, what they didn't know was that Xiang Nan not only possessed the talent for lightning meridians, he was also a divine grade. In particular, Xiang Nan had undergone many body refinements, and his sole goal was to improve his resistance to electricity. This kind of ability had played an extremely powerful role at this moment. You actually found a lightning meridian martial skill. Xiang Nan stared at Chu Yu and said, it's a pity that you don't have the lightning meridian's talent. As he spoke, Xiang Nan threw the lightning ball at Chu Yu. The lightning ball condensed the power of over 100 lightning arrows from Chu Yu. When the lightning ball flew in the air, it had already burst out with terrifying lightning destructive power. "You can't escape," Xiang Nan said coldly. Chu Yu had no choice but to retreat. She actually jumped directly outside the floating island. Moreover, there was a strange and sinister smile on her face. "What?" Xiang Nan was stunned. He saw that Chu Yu's body had suddenly become void. Her entire body had turned into a ghost, and she had actually merged into the ranks of countless ghosts. Heavenly Yin fiend body. Xiang Nan's heart sank. Did this woman learn the Heavenly Yin fiend body so quickly? Chapter 475 Berserk Xiang Nan. Where are you running to? Quenching the sun. Xiang Nan raised his left hand high and a fierce sunlight descended. Immediately after, he raised his saber and a ray of heavenly yang saber light chased after Chu Yu. The saber light directly shot into the army of undead, killing more than a dozen black undead with a single saber strike. When all the undead encountered the power of the sun, they were powerless to resist. However, the number of undead was too large, and the rift that Xiang Nan had cleaved was also fleeting, and it was immediately filled by the other undead. However, Xiang Nan knew that his saber had missed Chu Yu, and that Chu Yu's omnipresent killing intent was still enveloping him. This kid's martial arts are truly endless. "Xiaoman, let's kill him together," Shen Ming shouted. And Xiaoman made an understanding look and rushed towards Xiang Nan with his sword in hand, commanding the Firebird to smash down on Xiang Nan. Xiang Nan faced the Firebird, and the Azure Dragon went out to sea, directly hitting the Firebird's body. Now, Shen Ming found the right opportunity and jumped into the sky. A long sword descended from the sky and slashed straight at Xiang Nan's body. In that instant, even the Azure Dragon was crushed to pieces by the pressure. Xiang Nan felt that his entire body was under incredible pressure, and even his legs were about to be broken. Boom! The enormous floating island was unable to withstand such a pressure, and it actually shattered with a loud explosion. Dream Butterfly. Xiang Nan kicked a piece of rubble and flew out, hugging the dream butterfly in his arms, using the sun to resist the undead that had suddenly rushed in. The floating island instantly healed. Xiang Nan threw out a strand of Yuan Qi and let himself jump back to the floating island. That person's martial skill can activate the power of the mountains, but its release speed is extremely slow. We need someone to cooperate with us. Dream Butterfly whispered in Xiang Nan's ear. Yes, I can already tell, Xiang Nan said. Shen Ming's martial skill was indeed formidable. It was so powerful that even Xiang Nan's Thunder Dragon Saber technique could not withstand it. However, the biggest weakness of that mountain martial skill was just as Dream Butterfly had said. Ah, be careful. As the two of them were conversing, Dream Butterfly suddenly screamed. Before Xiang Nan could react, he felt a huge dragging force coming from Meng Dai's body. Immediately after, Meng Dai was pulled out of Xiang Nan's embrace. Xiang Nan suddenly turned around and saw that Chu Yu, who had transformed into a fierce ghost, was holding the Dream Butterfly with a sinister smile and retreating into the abyss behind her. Xiang Nan, you killed my beloved man. I want to kill your beloved woman as well. Countless black ghosts howled, seemingly about to devour Dream Butterfly and Chu Yu. Stop him, don't let him save him. Shen Ming and Xiaoman both attacked. You're courting death. Xiang Nan stared fixedly at Chu Yu, and then his body disappeared out of thin air. Ha! Chu Yu suddenly felt a fierce sun shine on her body. In an instant, the black gas in her entire body scattered and she let out a miserable scream like a ghost. Xiang Nan directly arrived behind Chu Yu with a flash step. He raised his saber and landed on Chu Yu's shoulder. At the same time, Quenching Yang also hit Chu Yu. Chu Yu let go of her hands as she screamed miserably and fled into the depths of the abyss in a sorry state. Unfortunately, she was in a fierce ghost state, and Xiang Nan's saber strike did not cut off her remaining right arm. "Ha, don't let him come back." And Xiaomin and Shenming were overjoyed as they repeatedly shot out saber light towards Xiang Nan, cutting off the path that Xiang Nan had taken to jump back. Countless undead spirits wrapped around Xiang Nan and were constantly crushed into powder by the sun. However, Xiang Nan had lost his focus and could not jump back. Behind, Dream Butterfly cried out in alarm. The two of them had already begun to fall. He threw out a strand of Yuan Qi and didn't allow it to wrap around the floating island. Instead, he directly smashed into the floating island and used the tremendous rebound force to shoot himself backwards. At the same time, as he approached the floating island behind him, he threw out another strand of Yuan Qi to wrap around the floating island. However, when Xiang Nan looked back, his heart sank. Chu Yu had already expected this move. She was already standing on the floating island behind her. With a single palm strike, she shattered the floating island, causing Xiang Nan's Yuan Qi to fall into nothingness. Afterwards, she turned into a fierce ghost and jumped into the army of the undead. Xiang Nan failed in his grab and his body began to fall rapidly. He released another strand of Yuan Qi to entangle the rehealed floating island. At this time, An Xiaomin and Shenming's essence sword light flew over and shattered the floating island once more. Xiang Nan had already fallen more than 50 meters away, and no matter what, his Yuan Qi could no longer catch the floating island. This time, it's really over. Xiang Nan's pupils contracted. "I'm satisfied to die in your arms." Dream Butterfly was relieved, lying in Xiang Nan's arms and closing her eyes. Chu Yu revealed her true body and stood at the edge of the floating island, looking down. She smiled sinisterly and said, "Xiang Nan, you should regret it. Pay for my brother Sima's life." Whoosh! "I can be considered to have killed this brat." And Xiaomin heaved a sigh of relief. This guy is really difficult to deal with. They watched Xiang Nan's sunlight descend and disappear into the endless abyss of the undead before they heaved a sigh of relief. However, there was no end to the heavens, and at this moment, the gravity suddenly changed. The sky turned into an abyss. The abyss turned into the sky. Shit! The three of them exchanged glances and cried out, "When are you not going to convert? You have to convert now." The three of them hurriedly flipped over and jumped onto the other side of the floating island. The three of them suddenly looked up into the sky and said, "Could that brat? Damn it, what is that?" Shenming pointed at the sky and cried out in alarm. In the sky, a fierce light shone down. The strong light shot out from the cracks in the dense ranks of the undead. Thunder. Dragon-shocking sunshine. Xiang Nan descended from the sky like a heavenly deity. He raised both of his hands high up and a 50-meter tall lightning saber light descended from the sky. "Run!" Chu Yu flashed out. She could only save one of the two. Even if she decisively carried away Shenming, who was even stronger, she opened her arms and wrapped Shenming in a fierce ghost's body, quickly retreating from the floating island. Chu Yu. You. And Xiaomin was at a loss as he vainly chopped out streaks of flaming saber light towards the sky. However, how could these flaming saber rays withstand the dragon-shocking sunshine that had been strengthened by the power of the sun? The 50-meter-tall saber light descended majestically. An Xiaoman and the entire floating island were shattered into powder. An Xiaoman let out a miserable scream and his body was annihilated by the 10,000-meter radiance. Pine. The floating island instantly healed. Xiang Nan held the dream butterfly in his left hand and landed on the ground. He quickly said, "This place should be very close to the exit. Let's charge." With that, he hugged Dream Butterfly and immediately jumped towards the next floating island. On the opposite floating island, Chu Yu and Shen Ming were already waiting. Shen Ming slashed down with his sword, and a sword light that was flying slowly, but with boundless power, slowly pressed down on him. Chu Yu fired 3 yuan qi arrows at Xiang Nan. "Idiots! Since you insist on staying with me, I will kill you." Xiang Nan slashed at Shen Ming's sword light and used the rebound force to bounce him back to the floating island. He put down the dream butterfly with one hand and violently shook the dragon blood saber with the other. Zhang! The dragon blood saber vibrated violently, and the red devil blood thunder surged out. The red lightning wrapped around Xiang Nan like a living red demon of lightning. Xiang Nan had a head full of blood-red lightning long hair, and his eyes shone with powerful red lightning. "You're courting your own death." Xiang Nan's realm suddenly soared to the second level of the heavenly Yuan realm. His body bowed slightly, and then he jumped fiercely. His body turned into a ray of red light and instantly rushed to the floating island opposite him. "Ah, you!" Shen Ming was so scared that his body trembled. Xiang Nan directly pierced through Shen Ming's body. He pulled his hands together and tore Shen Ming into 2 halves on the spot. Chapter 476 Hell. Xiang Nan grabbed onto Shen Ming's collar and roared, "Come on! Come on!" That Chu Yu had already jumped off the floating island and flew towards the floating island where the dream butterfly was in the form of a fierce ghost. "Xiang Nan, I want your woman's life." Gotcha! A second crack appeared on the dragon blood saber. Xiang Nan quickly suppressed the red demon blood lightning and his cultivation base returned to the 5th level of the origin realm. He angrily said, "I'll let you escape." The tribulation fingerless finger. Xiang Nan took a step forward and led the 10-meter-tall Buddha standing phantom to point in the direction Chu Yu flew in. The phaseless tribulation finger transformed into a black finger force that pierced through countless black souls. This finger power was extremely mysterious. Once those black undead encountered the tribulation-free finger, they all turned snow white. Moreover, they wore a relieved smile on their faces as they turned into specks of white spots and dissipated into reincarnation. The phaseless tribulation finger accurately struck Chu Yu's back. With a scream, Chu Yu's realm dropped by 1 level, and even the heavenly Yin Fiend physique's form dissipated. Regardless of whether it was a martial skill or a technique, they needed a stable Yuan Qi as a support. It was like a person running at a high speed. The reason why he ran so quickly and steadily was because he had a very accurate grasp of his body's support and strength. If that person were to suddenly lose a large portion of his strength while running, he would definitely fall to the ground and eat dog shit because his body was out of balance. The most ordinary running movements were still like this, and profound evasion techniques required even more balance of Yuan Qi. After Chu Yu was struck by the phaseless tribulation finger, her cultivation realm suddenly dropped by a level, and her Yuan Qi also instantly weakened, causing her Yuan Qi to lose balance and recover from the state of the escape technique to her true body. However, in this way, Chu Yu was immediately pierced through by countless undead souls. Within the vast army of undead souls, Chu Yu's incomparably miserable screams could be heard. Xiang Nan once again tempered the sun. He carried his body with the sunlight and jumped back to the floating island where Dream Butterfly was. He hugged Dream Butterfly and jumped towards the floating island in front of him. He jumped over 30 floating islands in a row. Just as his Yuan Qi was exhausted, a space-time passageway appeared on the last floating island. "Is she dead?" Meng Dai hurriedly asked. Xiang Nan panted heavily and said, "Most likely, she is dead. I saw her being pierced through by a dozen or so undead souls and fell into the abyss. She probably won't be able to live. This place is too dangerous. Let's go to the next floor first." Holding the Dream Butterfly in his arms, he jumped into the space-time passageway and arrived at the 6th level of the Devil Sea. "Take this. Search it. I'll recover my vitality first." Xiang Nan threw Shenming's storage ring to Dream Butterfly and activated the thunder to replenish his exhausted essence. The Dream Butterfly shook Shenming's storage ring, and many things fell out. "Isn't this the talisman?" Dream Butterfly grabbed a sparkling pendant. The pendant was carved from a very peculiar type of fire jade. The jade was white, and there was a faint flame flowing inside. Its body was carved into a holy woman's appearance. The moment it touched it, Dream Butterfly felt warm and comfortable all over her body. "And, put it on first. I wonder what use this jade has. Perhaps it can protect your safety," Xiang Nan said. Dream Butterfly happily put the pendant around her neck. She thought for a moment and hid the exposed pendant in her bra so that she wouldn't be afraid of being discovered by Shenming's acquaintance. After Xiang Nan replenished his Yuan Qi, he discovered that it was already night on the 6th floor. Looking into the distance, it was pitch black, and under the hazy moonlight, the visibility was not high. Beside the two of them was a stone tablet with 2 big words written on it, "Hell." His Xiang Nan couldn't help but gasp, "The first floor is the gate of hell. Is this floor hell?" Evidently, this place was definitely not the real hell. As for whether there was any hell in the world, it was not clear. However, since the 6th floor was called hell, it was definitely similar to the legendary hell. Because what he saw and heard before made Xiang Nan understand that the name of every floor in the Devil's Sea was a joke. It was definitely not as simple as scaring people. "Let's take a look first." Xiang Nan stood up and pulled Dream Butterfly forward bit by bit. "Those annoying bastards have been pushing us all the way to the end. This is considered revenge. Kill them all clean." Dream Butterfly patted her chest as if she was getting revenge. Xiang Nan, however, was not happy. He raised his dragon blood saber and silently stroked the 2 cracks on it. Xiang Nan still remembered that when he first found the dragon blood saber in the nature sect, he had sworn an oath to fight alongside it. However, in a short period of time, the dragon blood saber had been destroyed like this by him. The 2 cracks on the blade looked very slight, but these 2 cracks had already threatened the balance of the dragon blood saber. If it further increased the number of cracks, it would be in danger of shattering if it added a few more. "I was too reckless," Xiang Nan sighed and said guiltily. Meng Dai comforted, "Forget it, you are not a sage. Anyone who is forced to die by them again and again will lose their rationality. It's normal to be angry. Hey, look. Was this once a city?" Dream Butterfly pointed at the broken city wall that was gradually appearing. Xiang Nan nodded and said, "It seems so." They had already entered the area of an ancient city. It was said to be a city, but it was almost impossible to identify it. Outside the shattered city walls, there were no signs of any ancient buildings. Most likely, the walls were buried underground, revealing only damaged walls 3 to 4 meters high. However, As the two walked, they discovered that the surrounding scenery had begun to change. Black shadows crouched on some of the city walls. When they first saw these shadows, Xiang Nan and Dream Butterfly became vigilant. They only felt that in this dark night, those shadows were silently squatting on the city wall. The atmosphere was exceptionally strange. But when he got closer, he saw that there was a statue squatting on the wall. These sculptures were mostly similar in shape. They were all non-human objects. Their bodies were half bowed and half squatting, with a pair of huge black wings on their backs. At the top of the joints of the wings, there were even hooks that resembled claws. Above the heads of these monsters was a pair of curved horns. The fangs in their mouths pierced out of their mouths, but each sculpture lowered its head. It seems to be some kind of totem. Xiang Nan said thoughtfully, "There are people in this world who worship everything, and some people treat ghosts as totems." The two of them moved forward while chatting. It was really because this place was too strange and quiet. They chatted to relax their mood. Gotcha. Just as he was saying that, a voice that sounded like a small pebble suddenly came from behind him. The tendons in Xiang Nan's mind instantly tensed up, and he immediately turned around to look. However, there was nothing behind him, except for the more and more ghost sculptures. Chapter 477 Pavilion. Am I too suspicious? Xiang Nan frowned. Nowadays, Xiang Nan was already very cautious. If he didn't know how to take a cut and learn a lesson, then no one would be pitiful even if he died. He immediately cast his lightning-like eyes, and a flash of lightning flashed through his pupils, focusing on observing the ghost sculptures. Looking at it, he felt relieved. Those sculptures were stones, and they were solid stones. Other than that, there wasn't even the slightest bit of excess. Not to mention the fluctuations of essence and demonic qi. No problem, I was too overly concerned. Xiang Nan patted Meng Dai on the shoulder and asked, "Are you hungry?" Meng Dai obediently shook her head and said, "No." Creak. Before Meng Dai could utter the word, "hungry," another strange sound came from behind the two of them. This time, even Dream Butterfly could hear it clearly, and her expression instantly changed. Xiang Nan turned around and saw that there was nothing strange behind him. It was just the sculptures and the broken walls, but it seemed that something was wrong. He shook his head and was about to turn around to ask Dream Butterfly, but when his head had just turned back, and only half of it, his entire neck stiffened. Xiang Nan's expression changed abruptly. He turned his head back with difficulty. With this look, he immediately took 2 steps back and said, "Holy shit. I've really seen a ghost." He finally realized something was amiss. The reason for that was because those sculptures had all lowered their heads at the beginning, but now, when they looked over, all of the sculptures had raised their heads. Moreover, their faces were all aimed at Xiang Nan and Dream Butterfly. Such a strange scene caused Xiang Nan to have goosebumps. Ah! The talisman has lit up. Dream Butterfly hurriedly pointed at her chest. She opened her outer garment and saw a sparkling light within it. Creak, creak. At this moment, the sculptures all stood up. These things had strange legs, they looked like dog legs, and their knees were turned backwards. On their faces, there was a nose the length of a finger, and their fangs flickered with cold light under the moonlight. What is it? Pretend to be a ghost. Xiang Nan slanted his great saber and slashed down at a sculpture. The sharp lightning saber light illuminated several city walls. Those strange sculptures all soared into the sky, flapping their large black wings one after another. They floated in mid-air, looking down at Xiang Nan and the other from above. One of the ghosts rushed down from the sky and let out a cry similar to that of a baby crying. Xiang Nan slashed forward, and the ghost used its sharp claws to firmly grasp the blade. Its sharp claws rubbed against the blade, making a grating sound. Such great strength! Xiang Nan was shocked. The ghost actually flapped its wings and flew upwards, wanting to snatch away Xiang Nan's giant saber. Fortunately, the giant saber's grip was shaped like a dragon claw and was already wrapped around Xiang Nan's arm. This snatch was not able to snatch it away. Xiang Nan pointed his left hand at the ghost's forehead and pointed at IMMORTAL's power. The flame finger hit the ghost, knocking its head backwards and dropping some rubble. Xiang Nan took back the huge saber and leapt into the air, cleverly slicing the strange man in half. But at this moment, an even stranger scene appeared. The ghost that had been split in half was actually automatically connected together and flapped its wings as it flew away. Immediately after, numerous ghosts and monsters swooped down together in the darkness. What the hell? Dream Butterfly was shocked. Are these things immortal? She hurriedly raised the talisman. The holy light emitted by the talisman immediately caused the ghosts to chuckle and emit large amounts of black smoke. These ghosts hurriedly flew back high. After circling a few times, they seemed to be sure that the talisman wouldn't harm their lives, so they pounced down again. Yan Flame Saber Technique. Xiang Nan held the huge saber horizontally and made a posture of drawing the saber. As the ghosts approached, he swiftly drew out his saber. In an instant, he slashed 13 times in a row. In a second, he slashed 39 times. 39 sharp lightning saber lights shot into the sky, turning into a fan-shaped light. The ghosts shrouded in the saber light were all cut into pieces and fell to the ground. However, the rubble quickly healed and continued to gather together to form new ghosts. Run! Xiang Nan took advantage of the fact that the ghosts hadn't completely healed, and grabbed the dream butterfly and sprinted wildly. After the two of them ran for a distance, the ghost behind them had already flapped its wings and started chasing after them. There's a pavilion shining there. Meng Dai pointed to the left. Xiang Nan simply hugged her in his arms and dodged into the pavilion 2 times in a row. This was a very small pavilion. There was only a simple stone table and 4 stone stools inside. The pavilion was octagonal in shape and had a blurry diameter of about 4 meters. However, strangely enough, the entire pavilion emitted a hazy layer of white light. After the ghosts chased after the pavilion, they didn't dare to approach it anymore. They all circled around the pavilion. The battle between Xiang Nan and the ghosts had attracted even more ghosts from afar. For a moment, the sky outside the pavilion was filled with dark ghosts, and black wings fluttered and flapped everywhere. At this moment, Xiang Nan and Dream Butterfly seemed to be in hell. In the dark world, apart from this small glowing pavilion, everything seemed so unreal. At this moment, a dazed dot of light appeared in the darkness. The dot of light was getting closer and closer, but it was a lantern. The one holding the lantern was a woman wearing strange clothes. Someone. Dream Butterfly hid in Xiang Nan's arms and said, "There are actually people in this kind of place. Why don't those ghosts attack her?" As she spoke, the woman walked closer and closer, and her mouth emitted waves of creepy laughter. This kind of laughter was terrifying. It was like the cry of a baby, the scream of a woman, the scream of a man, and the groan of an old man mixed together. When the woman walked near the pavilion, both Xiang Nan and Meng Dai felt their scalps go numb. Because they saw the woman's face. That woman had no face at all. Her face was only flat, only a huge crescent-shaped mouth, like a crack. The corners of their mouths were raised high to their ears. The woman tilted her head and suddenly let out a terrifying scream towards the pavilion. "Ja!" Hearing the cry, Meng Dai's ears bled and she jumped out of Xiang Nan's embrace. She walked out of the pavilion in a daze. Xiang Nan felt dizzy, as if countless insects were crazily drilling through his mind. He grabbed the dream butterfly and shouted in a low voice, "9 purities cosmos art." The circulation of the cultivation technique made Xiang Nan feel much better. He took out Dream Butterfly's talisman and stuffed it into her mouth. Meng Dai was in a trance for a moment, and her eyes finally regained their clarity. Chapter 478 Have a figure as big as a mountain. At this time, numerous dots of light began to appear in all directions. Those dots of light all moved towards the pavilion. Each dot of light was a woman with a lantern in her hand. These demons are evil. Xiang Nan furrowed his brows, and the huge saber in his hand shot wildly towards the outside of the pavilion. Sharp sabers shot out one after another, forming a radiant fan. Large amounts of ghosts were cut off and slowly recovered. The woman with the lantern was also slashed at the waist, but her upper body slowly crawled on the ground, hugging her lower body and butting together again. "You really can't die." Xiang Nan's heart skipped a beat. The strength of these items was roughly equivalent to an ordinary 5th level origin returning realm martial artist. To Xiang Nan, a 6th level origin returning realm martial artist was not worth looking at. However, the matter of undying was the most troublesome one for Xiang Nan. Seeing that more women were getting closer and closer, if they surrounded the pavilion and let out screams together, then it would really be troublesome. At this moment, thunder suddenly broke out in the sky and it began to rain. The dense rain poured down, and the raindrops were all black. After falling to the ground, they fell to the ground with a cracking sound. But strangely, the raindrops were actually black maggots. When the raindrops landed, they immediately turned into black maggots and began to wriggle. They stacked higher and higher, accumulating more and more maggots. Large amounts of maggots were already rolling into the pavilion. However, once these maggots entered the pavilion, they immediately turned into black smoke and floated into the sky. Xiang Nanqi said, "Even my lightning saber light can't kill them, but the light from the pavilion can kill them?" "Right." He patted his forehead and said, "I'm really stupid. My sun god technique was created for the evil spirits of these demons." He raised his left hand and used the little sun tempering technique. A thin, narrow beam of sunlight struck his hand and drew the power of the sun, hacking the sun blade towards the woman who posed the greatest threat. The woman was sliced into 2 halves. The saber light formed by the sun emitted a dazzling light. The woman's body was sliced open. Suddenly, black blood sprayed out. After the 2 halves of her body landed on the ground, it immediately withered into a black figure on the ground. "Nothing." Xiang Nan said happily, "The heavenly young divine art is indeed capable of killing these things. My Kaiyu master, you saved my life again." Now that he had found a way, Xiang Nan did not hesitate and directly used the complete sun quenching technique to activate the surging power of the sun. Then, he faced the ghosts from all directions outside the pavilion and chopped out the rays of the sun saber. Once those ghosts were struck by the saber light of the sun, there would be no survivors. They all turned into ash. There were too many ghosts. Xiang Nan had been releasing a full 9 minutes of saber light, but he had not been able to kill all the ghosts. However, there weren't many ghosts left outside the pavilion. Xiang Nan immediately activated the heavenly thunder to recover his yuan qi. After recovering his yuan qi, he rushed out and killed all the remaining ghosts and monsters. Friend, good skill. Suddenly, a human voice came from above the pavilion. Xiang Nan looked up and saw a person wearing a black cloak quietly standing on the protrusion at the top of the pavilion. Seeing Xiang Nan looking over, that person lightly landed on the ground. Xiang Nan took another look. This person's entire body was surrounded by a layer of ghost qi, and his face was enveloped by black qi, so he could not see clearly. Is it a person or a ghost? Xiang Nan raised his saber horizontally and shouted. Naturally, he is a human. The man waved his right hand and the black gas on his body immediately dissipated, revealing the appearance of a young man. Xiang Nan heaved a sigh of relief and frowned. Who are you? Why aren't these ghosts attacking you? The man smiled and said, I want to ask you who you are. Why can you kill these ghosts? It's truly eye-opening. Forget it, I'll answer your question first. Since you're here, you should have broken through the gates of hell, right? There are some profound Tao techniques on the floating island there that can be used to save your life in this hell. I'm curious. If you've learned the profound Tao technique, why don't you use it to avoid ghosts and monsters? If you haven't learned it, how did you pass through the gates of hell? Naturally, I have my own methods. Xiang Nan did not know whether the other party was an enemy or a friend, so he did not reveal much. The man smiled and stretched out his right hand, saying, Shenliang, martial practitioners of the Nine Firmaments continent and the Black Mountain sect. Shenliang. Xiang Nan's heart trembled, and he subconsciously blocked the line of sight between Shenliang and Dream Butterfly. Dream Butterfly closed her mouth and hid the talisman in her mouth. She quickly stuffed the necklace into her mouth. Shenliang, Black Mountain sect. Could it be that he had something to do with Shenming? Xiang Nan did not want to take the risk. He said, we were besieged just now, and you did not lend us any help. It seems that we are not enemies, but we are not friends. It is better to go our separate ways. Shenliang smiled and said, the people I meet always curry favor with me and want to be friends with me. You are the first person to refuse me to show my goodwill. You are a very interesting young man. Let's talk about each other. Xiang Nan didn't want to stay, so he turned around and left with Dream Butterfly. Shenliang hugged his shoulders and said, friend, isn't it too disrespectful to leave like this? Xiang Nan did not turn around and whispered, keep the talisman hidden. From the looks of it, this person is around 18 or 19 years old. It is very likely that he is Shenming's brother. He's at the 7th level of origin return, so it's not easy to deal with him. Meng Dai puffed out her talisman and said, why don't we just be friends with him and find an opportunity to kill him when he isn't paying attention? Keeping this future trouble is also a problem. It's better to eliminate the roots. Xiang Nan frowned, why do you have such thoughts? We owe him a debt. His brother offended us and we killed him. But his brother has no grievances or enmity with us. How can he kill us at will? Meng Dai curled her lips and said, all right, you're reasonable. You're a great hero, and I'm a little woman with the heart of a snake and a scorpion. Xiang Nan didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and said, all right, don't be angry. If we also casually kill people, wouldn't we be on the same side as Shenliang, Sima Nantian, and the others? Although I, Xiang Nan, am not a hero, I admit to sitting upright. I will never be a sinister villain. Ah! You changed your method and called me sinister. Meng Dai's cheeks bulged with anger, and she pinched Xiang Nan's waist. Gotcha. Aya, it's broken. Meng Dai raised her right hand. My God! I really want my own life. Xiang Nan rubbed his temples, feeling that this woman was too incomprehensible. Blow. Meng Dai put her fractured finger close to Xiang Nan's mouth. What's the use of blowing tubes? Xiang Nan unhappily grabbed her hand, put his finger back in place, and smeared her with a bit of trauma medicine. As he spoke, the ground suddenly shook. So what? Xiang Nan pulled out his huge saber and looked in the direction where the voice came from. Upon seeing this, Xiang Nan and Meng Dai were both stunned. In the distant night sky, a giant that was over 100 meters tall was carrying an iron rod that was more than 50 meters long as he rumbled on the ground. The giant had 2 heads, each with a pair of curved horns. There was only one red eye on one head and one blue eye on the other. Chapter 479 Fellow Disciple. That thing is too big. Meng Dai swallowed her saliva. What kind of concept was a 100-meter tall giant? One toe of his was taller than a human's. We can't afford to provoke this thing. It's best not to provoke it. Try to walk around it. Xiang Nan held the dream butterfly behind him and stared at the giant vigilantly. Fortunately, the giant didn't seem to pay much attention to his surroundings. Perhaps it was because he was too invincible here. He didn't even check if there were any tiny humans around. He just carried the iron rod and rumbled away. We're far away. Let's go. Xiang Nan grabbed the dream butterfly and immediately ran west. The entrance to the Demon Sea's basic spacetime zone was located in the west. As long as the direction wasn't off, they could usually reach the end. Xiang Nan didn't dare to run too fast. The faster he ran, the more yuan qi he used. The more yuan qi fluctuations he used, the easier it would attract monsters. After running for half a day, a bigger pavilion appeared in front of them. From afar, the pavilion could reach a diameter of about 50 meters, much larger than the pavilion that Xiang Nan and the others had encountered earlier. There are many people inside. Meng Dai pointed at the pavilion. The 2 of them stopped 50 meters away from the pavilion. Inside the pavilion, there was a large group of people sitting in 2s and 3s. They don't seem to have come from the same faction. They may have formed an alliance temporarily. Xiang Nan glanced at them roughly. Those people were all dressed in different colors. They did not come from the same sect, the same continent, or even from different eras. Shall we go over and take a look? There are many people and great strength. Meng Dai said. Just as Xiang Nan was hesitating, someone in the pavilion suddenly stood up and shouted, "Is that my junior brother Xiang Nan standing in the east? You know me?" Xiang Nan was stunned for a moment. He looked at that person and immediately became happy. He said, "It's our Haran sex people. Dream Butterfly, quickly follow me." The 2 of them rushed into the pavilion. 3 people in the pavilion stood up. They were 2 men and a woman. Judging from the characteristics of their yuan qi fluctuations, these 3 people were cultivating the pure yuan technique of the vast heavens. Ah, I think I recognized the wrong person. A tall and majestic sect man rubbed his nose and said, "From afar, your outline looks very similar to my junior brother Xiang Nan. When you get closer, you will know that your appearance is different. You're not mistaken. I'm Xiang Nan. I just made some changes to my face." Xiang Nan smiled and said, "I wonder how to address this senior apprentice brother. It really is junior brother Xiang Nan." The 3 of them were all happy. The tall Haran sect disciple said, "My name is Du Shiyuan." He pointed at another round-faced man and a duck-faced woman. "This is Yu Sheng and Chueya." The three of us are from the third stage Sword Sect Academy. In terms of words, you should call us senior brother and senior sister. We've watched your battle in the 12 sect joint examination. I didn't expect to meet you here. What a coincidence. These three people were all at the 7th level of the Origin Return Realm, and their strengths weren't ordinary. Xiang Nan was also very happy and hurriedly greeted the three of them separately. At this time, some of the other people in the pavilion sat down on the ground and raised their heads to glance at Xiang Nan. Some of them simply lay on their arms without even raising their eyelids. What about this one? Du Shuyuan pointed at Meng Dai and asked. Dream Butterfly's identity was quite special. Xiang Nan was not willing to reveal her background. He said, "Oh, this is a good friend of mine, Little Butterfly." Many disciples of Haran sect had seen Dream Butterfly before. Fortunately, the three of them had never seen her before, so they greeted Dream Butterfly. Senior brother Shuyuan, when did you come in? Why didn't I meet you? Xiang Nan was naturally extremely happy when he met his fellow disciples. Du Shuyuan smiled and said, "As soon as the Devil's Sea opened, we came in." Xiang Nan thought for a moment and understood that he was almost a day late when he entered the Devil's Sea. In the end, he was trapped in the Devil's Sea Hall for another day. It was almost 2 days later than the first batch of people who entered. It would be great if you could come. Du Shuyuan grabbed Xiang Nan's arm and raised Xiang Nan's right hand. Friends, let me introduce you to him. This is Xiang Nan, the direct disciple of our Haran sect Sun Peak and Su Kaiyu Peak Master. He knows the Sun God technique. With him here, our efficiency in killing monsters will be greatly improved. Hearing this, Xiang Nan frowned slightly. He thought to himself that this senior brother was too careless. How could he casually say such a thing? As a result, Du Shuyuan's words attracted everyone's attention. The people from those forces all stood up and began to seriously examine Xiang Nan for the first time. Sun God technique. One of the four people on the left frowned and said, "Do you really know the Sun God technique?" "Oh, let me introduce myself. My name is Zhao Hongpa. I'm from the Primordial Chaos sect. I'm at the 7th level of the Origin Return sect." "Oh, so it's the senior brothers of the Primordial Chaos sect." Xiang Nan cupped his fists. "I'm from the lower Red Earth continent, the Azure Underworld sect, and Zhangshou. These four people are all my fellow disciples of the Azure Underworld sect." Another group of people introduced themselves. Senior brothers of the Azure Underworld sect. Xiang Nan cupped his fists and recognized each other again. In addition, there were 5 groups of people who did not introduce themselves. Among these people, 2 groups of people dressed like people from the Western regions. They should also be from the martial origin calendar. The other 3 teams were obviously from 80,000 years ago, during the Heavenly Desolation calendar. These 2 groups of friends are also from Wu Yuanli. As expected, Du Shuyuan introduced Xiang Nan and pointed at the 2 groups of people. One is from the flowers of the Western regions, and the other is from the flood stream of the Western regions. Flowers, torrents. Xiang Nan's pupils narrowed. The origins of these 2 groups of people were incredible. Fanhua was a famous assassin organization, and it was also in existence at the top of the pyramid. It was much more powerful than the Black Flag. Every flower killer was a peerless genius. I heard that these killers came and went without a trace, and killing 17 or 18 martial artists of the same realm was like playing. As for Flood Stream, it was a top bandit organization, one of the best. Their power was completely incomparable to the Scarlet Tiger. As for the martial practitioners of the flood stream, they were all extremely powerful. It was said that any one of them could easily challenge 3 to 5 disciples of a first-class sect. Xiang Nan didn't quite understand why his sect's senior brothers and sisters had mixed up with these two notorious dark forces. Evidently, Du Shuyuan also saw through Xiang Nan's thoughts and explained, "There are dangers everywhere here. We have no choice but to form an alliance temporarily. Xiang Nan, you may not be too clear about this. The ghosts in this spacetime zone have their own cultivation techniques and martial skills hidden on their bodies. We've already killed 16 5-flower ghosts together here, and we've also obtained a mid-grade local-grade martial skill." 5 flowers. Xiang Nan's heart skipped a beat. An Earth-grade intermediate-grade martial skill was too rare. He had found them on the upper floor. Although their grade was quite high, they were all magical techniques, not martial skills. However, what was the 5 flowers? Du Shuyuan said, "Didn't you notice? The ghosts here have petals in their eyes. The more petals they have, the stronger the ghosts are. That's why." Xiang Nan nodded. "Have you said enough?" At this time, a flower killer stood up and said coldly, "If you're done, then go out and fight. Don't waste time." Chapter 480 Paramitha Lanceolata. From the unfriendly tone of the flower killer, it could be seen that the status of the Haran sect martial practitioners in this temporary alliance was still very low. The Haran sect itself was at the bottom of the 8 great sects, especially the people from the flowers and flood streams, who didn't put the first-rate sects in their eyes. Moreover, Xiang Nan saw that the martial artists in this pavilion were generally at the 7th level of origin return, and the difference in realms was very small. The flower killer wore a loose black robe and looked at Xiang Nan from the shadows of his hood with 2 sharp eyes. Suddenly, the killer disappeared from the spot. When he reappeared, he had already grabbed Xiang Nan's shoulder with his hand and pinched him hard. Xiang Nan's heart skipped a beat, and the killer disappeared again. He appeared on Xiang Nan's left and grabbed his other shoulder. Before Xiang Nan could react, the killer had already disappeared from Xiang Nan's side. He pinched Xiang Nan's shoulders, temples, wrists, and spiritual sea in his abdomen. By the time Xiang Nan took a step back, the flower killer had already returned to his original position and stood there quietly, as if he had never moved. So fast. Xiang Nan's heart sank. Not bad in terms of physical fitness and martial Dao strength. It's useful. The flower killer gave Xiang Nan such an evaluation in an ice-cold tone. However, the killer's actions made Xiang Nan feel very uncomfortable. It was as if he was a trafficked animal that was randomly examined by someone. The flower killer said to Du Shuyuan, "The 3 of you were originally trash, but now you want to bring 2 trash to share a piece of the pie. However, considering your junior brother's strength, let him follow you." Du Shuyuan, I don't care if this brat is Xiang Nan or Xiang Dongxiang Shi, we won't protect him. A strong man walked out with his shoulders in his arms and said, Du Shuyuan, I don't care if this brat is Xiang Nan or Xiang Dongxiang Shi. Take care of him yourself. If he drags us back, I'll be the first to kill him. Xiang Nan was already very unhappy when he was examined like that by the assassin of flowers. Now that he heard this strong man speak like this, he sneered and said, "Kill me? There are many people in this world who want to kill me. I'm afraid that you won't be ranked on the list." "Hey, Xiang Nan, don't be rash." Du Shuyuan hurriedly stopped Xiang Nan, afraid that Xiang Nan would offend those people. Xiang Nan frowned and said, "Senior brother, these people obviously don't take us seriously. Why do we have to follow them? Why do we have to be so cheap? The overall situation is the most important. The overall situation is the most important. Du Shuyuan smiled bitterly and sighed. That's right, Xiang Nan. We're not here to fight. We're here to obtain good martial skills. Haran sect, senior sister Tsueya also came to persuade him. Xiang Nan could not look at other people's faces, but he could not help but give face to his senior brother and senior sister. The senior brothers of the third grade academy had taken good care of Xiang Nan when they were in the Haran sect. All right. Xiang Nan endured a mouthful of anger and said, everything is up to senior apprentice brother and senior apprentice sister. Finished arguing. A heavenly desolation calendar martial artist carried the giant sword on his shoulder and lazily said, let's go after the quarrel. I've already marked a 5 flowers ghost before. Now hurry up and rush over. Don't blame me for not reminding you. You can keep up with us as hard as you can. If you fall behind, we won't wait. After saying that, the 2 teams of desolate calendar martial artists smiled proudly. Then, they turned into streaks of light and sped away under the night sky. Those heavenly desolation calendar martial artists were extremely fast. Although they could not fly, the speed at which they could run with their legs was also astonishing. In the blink of an eye, they had disappeared. Life and death are in the heavens. If you want to follow, it is also your own choice. No one will save you even if you die. A few flower killers disappeared on the spot. Flood! A strong man roared. The other sturdy men shouted in unison, ride your horse and raise your whip. After saying that, the several strong men stood together. Their yuan qi suddenly erupted, and with a boom, the 5 of them turned into a huge galloping horse. This kind of movement technique is quite interesting. It can be combined with the strength of a few people to stack together. Meng Dai smiled. Xiang Nan, let's hurry up and leave. We mustn't be thrown away. Otherwise, it won't be our turn to split the spoils of war. As Du Shuyuan spoke, he immediately ran into the distance. Let's go and see what tricks they have. Xiang Nan hugged Dream Butterfly and joined the running team. On the vast land, the front and rear teams were running at top speed. Everyone displayed their abilities and tried their best to increase their speed to the fastest possible speed. Xiang Nan's physical fitness was extremely good, and his yuan qi was also very solid. In this kind of long-distance running, he gradually surpassed others. At the beginning, he surpassed Du Shuyuan, and then he surpassed the people from the Primordial Chaos sect and the Azure Underworld sect. Even the glowing horses condensed by the flood warriors in front of them were constantly being pulled closer by Xiang Nan. The warriors of the Primordial Chaos sect and the Azure Underworld sect were dumbfounded as they said, "This Xiang Nan is so fast." But very quickly, the group in front of them stopped. Xiang Nan also slowed down and discovered that everyone had stopped beside a quiet river. This was a black river, about 50 meters wide. Strangely, there was no river water in the riverbed. Instead, it was a silent black mist that rolled away. At first glance, the black mist had settled inside, really like black water. Such a strange river made Xiang Nan and Meng Dai speechless. On the other side of the river, a strange sea of flowers bloomed. The petals of those small flowers were fluorescent, and the flowers and leaves were made of light gray mist. Friend of flowers. An 80,000-year-old heavenly desolation calendar martial artist said, "Old rules, you guys go get the Prometha flower. We'll be in charge of supporting you." With that, a flower killer turned into an afterimage and quickly jumped across the river. But when he was in midair, a 10-meter-long arm suddenly stretched out from the mist river. The claws at the top of his arm were like ghost claws, fiercely salvaging towards the flower killer. This ghost hand was extremely fast and accurate, grabbing onto the killer's ankle in an instant. Attack! Many martial artists from the Heavenly Desolation calendar attacked in unison. They released a sharp blade light and sword light, shattering the ghost hand. The killer returned to his freedom, tapped on the shattered ghost hand, and continued to soar towards the other side. However, at this moment, more ghost hands appeared. Those ghost hands were countless, as if countless undead were buried in the river. Black arms popped out of the water and crazily grabbed the killer's ankle. The assassin managed to cross half the distance from the river, but was forced to retreat. "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and attack," the flower killer said coldly. The Heavenly Desolation calendar martial artists once again released sword light and saber light to chop down those ghost hands. However, those ghost hands could be shattered, but they could still be instantly restored. How could this be? A Heavenly Desolation calendar martial artist was shocked. This time, there are more ghost hands coming out than before. Boom! As soon as he finished speaking, the entire surface of the river gushed upwards. In the midst of the rolling fog, a giant ghost hand that was tens of meters long and nearly 5 meters thick rushed up. Novel Empire. Immortal God of Battle.